yell at us from heaven, hey, read the book, I told you what to do, and we'll give you some things from the Scripture in a minute about what you can do to help alleviate suffering if it's your fault. But if God gives you suffering, then there's nothing you can do about it. But in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, the Lord said, my grace is sufficient for thee. My strength is made perfect in weakness. Sometimes when we're strong and healthy, we feel like we don't need God. And God may send some suffering just to make you realize you need Him. As a purifying grace, it'll draw you closer to Him. Now, I think in this realm, we would say, if you want to make sure that you're doing everything God has commanded, there appear to be from Scripture 4 different sections or categories of verses or teachings on what you can do to remove suffering. There are certain laws given in the Bible having to do with sanitation. Now, in America, we don't have much trouble with this, but in many other countries, they experience an awful lot of trouble with suffering and illness and disease purely because of disobedience to God's laws on sanitation. The Bible says in Deuteronomy chapter 23, a passage I'm sure you've never heard preached about in any church anywhere, Deuteronomy 23:12 says, thou shalt have a place also without the camp, whither thou shalt go forth abroad, and thou shalt have a paddle upon thy weapon, and it shall be, when thou wilt ease thyself abroad, thou shalt dig therewith, and turn back, and cover that which cometh from thee. I'm sure you've never heard that passage preached on. What he's saying here is, look, when you folks are traveling through the wilderness, have a shovel. When you have to go to the bathroom, go out away from the camp, dig a hole, go to the bathroom, and cover it. Just simply covering human waste will alleviate an awful lot of suffering in many countries of the world. And here in America and many modern westernized countries, we don't have a problem with that because we have lots of laws about sewage disposal and things like that. But the simple fact is, in most of the world, there is a lot of suffering. Even the bubonic plague or the plagues of the 13 or 1400s were largely because of disobedience to this verse right here. They had open sewers running in the street, which the rats bred in there, and the fleas got on the rats, and the diseases spread from the fleas. Just one thing led to another. Nearly all of that could have been alleviated if the people would have just obeyed God's word. Sanitation laws are all through the Bible. The whole book of Leviticus is packed full of sanitation laws. The lepers were told, for instance, in Leviticus chapter 13, if the leper has the plague, he's supposed to tear his clothes, rent his clothes, his head should be bare, and he put a covering upon his upper lip and cry, unclean, unclean. I interpret that to mean the leper, when he came near somebody, was supposed to cover his upper lip, by the way, which means he couldn't breathe on anybody. As he walked up to somebody, he would cry, unclean, unclean, and they would realize, hey, this guy's a leper. Of course, God didn't tell him about germs coming out of your lungs and through the air. It was going to be many centuries before the microscope was invented. But the fact is, if they would simply obey God's word and cover your lip, you end up not breathing on people. The Bible has all sorts of laws about having to do with sanitation. In Leviticus 13, it talks about the leper and other diseases. They're supposed to wash their skin with water and wash them a second time. Cleanliness. And the Bible even talks about washing in moving water and washing the clothes and shave off all the hair in Leviticus 14:34. And tarry abroad out of his tent 7 days. Many viruses and bacteria can't live more than a few days outside of a host, and so if the person is cleansed and he's away from everybody else for 7 days, the disease won't be recycled as easily. So the laws given in the Scripture are just common sense, of course, and it came from God, godly wisdom. And there's so much about washing. There are 83 verses in the Bible that deal with washing, shaving off the head and washing, simple sanitation laws. I think obeying God's sanitation laws would help alleviate much suffering in the world. The second category of verses that have to do with suffering comes from exercise. In Genesis chapter 3, after Adam sinned, God talked to Adam and to Eve and said, Adam, because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and hast eaten of the tree of the which I commanded thee, saying, thou shalt not eat of it, cursed is the ground for thy sake. I probably read that passage a few hundred times before I realized, wait a minute, God said, I'm going to put a curse on the ground for your own good. This wasn't to be mean to Adam, this was to help Adam. God said, Adam, because you've sinned now and you live in a sinful world and a sinful body, I'm going to put a curse on the ground and you have to work for a living. Just plain hard work, exercise, sweat is a very important factor in health and being healthy. And if a person doesn't work hard or sweat or get some exercise, it's not good for them. Lots of different things go bad in the body. The body's designed to work and to get some exercise. People that sit at a desk all day, like I often have to do, try very hard to get some exercise in. When I go to the airports every week, I people see me running up the escalator, carrying my suitcases, and running down like I'm going to the airport, to the gate where I'm going to be, they think, oh, this guy's late, get out of his way. No, I'm not late. I'm trying to get some exercise. It's the only time I can get it. I'm running through the airport. So if you see me running through the airport, you can go ahead and say, hey, Brother Hovind, can you talk for a minute? Because I'll have time. I'm just running to get there to get some exercise. So I think some suffering is because we don't get enough exercise. God said in Genesis chapter 3, thorns and thistles shall it bring forth, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field. I think we're supposed to eat the right things. And in 1 Timothy chapter 4, bodily exercise profiteth little, but godliness is profitable unto all things, having the promise of the life that now is and that which is to come. I think this verse is teaching us that bodily exercise will profit in this life, but it won't profit in the life to come. So that's why I said at the beginning, if you're going to live to be 100 and die and go to hell, you've wasted your time. It'd be much more important to live in a sick body and go to heaven than live in a healthy body and go to hell. But I think exercise is important, and we don't get enough of that. Many people do not get enough. Also, in this would be the opposite of that, which goes in with the exercise, is rest. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 26, the disciples came and he said, sleep on now, take your rest. It's okay to get some rest. In Mark chapter 6, Jesus said to the disciples, when everything was so busy that day, he said, come ye yourselves apart into a desert place and rest a while. For they had no leisure, so much as to eat. Jesus said, look, fellas, come apart and rest for a while. My preacher used to say, if you don't come apart, you will come apart. And some people are so busy and have so much to do, they live under so much stress, they end up coming apart. And just take time to rest, a little mini vacation. I've got friends all over the country as I travel who are chiropractors or who do massage therapy. And just last week I was in a church and a man drove 300 miles to come over and see me and said, Brother Hovind, I'm a massage therapist and I've seen your tapes and it's really changed my life and I just want to help you. I know you have to stand a lot, you preach a lot, you're busy. Would you let me just let you relax for an hour? And boy, he worked on my back and my feet, and I thought I was going to melt right through the table. And he told me, I don't know if he can prove it or not, but he told me that George Burns lived to be 100 or so, and George Burns had a private masseuse who traveled with him and gave him a massage and made him completely relax every single day. Gave him a 45-minute massage every day. I can't afford that and don't know if that's necessary or not, but he did live to be 100. And he says Bob Hope has a massage therapist also that goes with him. And just relax. I'm not selling massage therapists or anything else, but I'm saying we do live under an awful lot of stress. And if you don't learn to just relax once in a while, you might not have time to take a 2-week vacation, but you can take a 20-minute vacation every day. Just get away from it all and relax. And we need that, folks. We live under too much stress. But that would be in the same category as bodily exercise. In Ephesians chapter 4, the Bible talks of the head, which is Christ, is the whole body is fitly joined together. I think, of course, it's obvious your head, where the brain is, controls your entire body. And a major part of health, as I understand it, is having everything lined up where the head can tell the rest of the body what to do. When my son my oldest son was just a few months old, he had very severe digestive problems. We spent a fortune on doctor bills and tried everything to get this boy. He couldn't digest anything. We tried mother's milk and every kind of formula there is in the world. He just couldn't digest it. Finally, one doctor put him on progestamil. Here I was making $100 a week and spending $30 a week on formula for my son. And we moved at that time to Kankakee, Illinois, and there was a chiropractor in the church. And I said, brother, I know nothing about chiropractic, absolutely nothing. Would you look at my son and tell me what's wrong with him? I didn't tell him what was wrong. I asked him to tell me what was wrong. Here's this little boy, 9 months old. He picked him up, looked at him, turned his head a little bit back and forth, laid him on his stomach, and felt down the back of his spine. He came to a place on this spine, and he said, oh, this vertebrae right here is twisted out of place. He said, I bet this boy has digestive trouble, doesn't he? I said, how did you know that? He said, well, your spine, of course, houses the nerves that go to all parts of your body. And he said, if one part of the spine is twisted out of place, it'll pinch a nerve going to whatever that nerve goes to and probably cause some kind of sickness or illness there, or certainly some pain. He said, now, the boy's 9 months old. He said, I'm going to push the bone back into place, which is not hard to do, a little simple chiropractic adjustment. He said, but you need to understand, the muscles that hold those bones in place normally have been out of place for 9 months. So it's probably going to pull it back out. He said, I'll need to push it back in and it'll pull back out. I need to do that maybe a dozen times. I don't know. but eventually it will learn to stay where it's supposed to be. So over the next few weeks, free of charge, he adjusted my son, and after 8 or 10 adjustments, he was fine, and his digestive system returned to normal. And now he's plenty healthy and eats an awful lot. So he's outgrown that can't digest or eat anything stage for sure, in his mid-20s now. But I think chiropractic is very important. Now, of course, some medical doctors are going to think this is quackery, but I have been in numerous car accidents. I've hurt my upper back and my neck and my lower back a tremendous amount. Have a lot of scar tissue there. And I would have to say, if it weren't for chiropractic, I probably would not be walking today. I'm going to give a conservative estimate and say I've probably been adjusted 4,000 times by chiropractors. I have maybe 100 of them around the country that know me and say, Brother Hovind, if you ever get in our area, come over and we'll give you a free adjustment. And they all have different techniques, and some are better than others, and some do different things than others. But Dr. Tyler up near St. Louis has, after 20 years of severe pain in my back from the car accidents, whiplash, he was able to absolutely fix it for me. And I feel great now, my upper back, and he gave me a good adjustment. He'll be on the tape in a little bit talking about nutrition and health, but he does chiropractic adjustments. And I think getting the body lined up is certainly scriptural. Everything needs to be joined together. And that would fit into the same category as exercise. Some people have a lot of suffering and pain because part of their body, their backbone, went out of place during birth. And the rest of the body has adjusted to the bone being out of place, and it ends up causing suffering or pain for a lifetime. And it could be alleviated. The sooner you catch it and fix it, the sooner the body can readjust to all this. I know when they fix my neck, sometimes it makes my lower back start hurting. And it's like if you had a stack of blocks and the bottom one was out, the rest of them would have to be compensated to still balance. And if your bottom vertebrae is out, the rest of them may twist or something just to keep you standing straight or to alleviate the pain, and you won't realize that the pain isn't really coming from where you think it's coming from. And so as they work out all the kinks, you end up doing much better. But another category of Bible verses about health comes from your attitude. Many people are a grouch, and they're not going to be healthy no matter what happens, because attitude has a profound effect on your health. The Bible says in Proverbs chapter 17, a merry heart doeth good like a medicine. I think just being cheerful would be helpful. It'll, just like a medicine, it'll heal an awful lot of things. Laughter is a tremendous thing to help people heal. Just laugh once in a while. In Proverbs chapter 16, the Bible says, pleasant words are as an honeycomb, sweet to the soul and health to the bones. Speaking sweetly to people, just be nice. A person that's a grouch can take all the vitamins they want and exercise all they want. They're probably still going to have some health problems because their attitude is not good. The Bible says, let not the sun go down upon your wrath. If you are angry and you go to bed angry, there's just an emotional problem there that tenses up. And I've heard say that people that are angry or don't release their anger properly, don't alleviate their stress, they end up getting ulcers. And yet when you laugh, I've been told that laughter produces the motions in the stomach. When you laugh real hard, your stomach, sometimes your stomach even hurts. The laughter does something so where you cannot produce ulcers. And it even helps ulcers to heal. So I can't prove that or not, but you might want to do some research on that. But I think having a good attitude would be important. A fourth category would be diet. And here's where you'll have, health food stores and vitamin experts come out of the woodwork and say, yep, that's right, that's where it all is. I don't think all health comes from diet, but I do think we do have a problem in most parts of the world with diet. This might go back to Satan's long-range plan of destroying humanity. God told Satan in Genesis chapter 3, someday the seed of the woman is going to bruise your head. And he's tried ever since to kill every seed of the woman that he can. And Satan has worked awfully hard to destroy humanity in every possible way. I think our food supply certainly has been, the quality has been diminished. And whether it's a satanic plot or not, I don't know. Maybe it's just love of money. But somebody said the rice crops originally in places like China had about 1,500 varieties of rice. And people came in through the years and decided this particular kind of rice grows faster or bigger or better than the rest. And pretty soon they've weeded out all of the old varieties of rice. Now we have 1 or 2 or 3 basic kinds of rice that are grown. So what's going to happen if there's a plague or a disease of a certain type of rice, it can wipe out half the rice crop. Whereas in the old days, if there were 1,500 varieties of rice, it would only wipe out 1/1500th, and it wouldn't cause a famine. So in the desire to raise more money, more capital from the ground, I think we've ended up getting rid of a lot of variations. This would apply to corn or wheat or anything else too, that might eventually cause us some trouble. Our food supply has been hurt. And when you eat fruit you buy at the store, oftentimes you're getting fruit that's been raised on steroids or herbicides or pesticides, and you're not really getting the quality that God originally intended to be in that fruit. Plus, what you eat and what you don't eat, and the quality of your food, the fiber, the water, the oxygen supply, so many factors when it comes to diet come in here. You might eat lots of good food, but if your body can't absorb it, it doesn't do any good. If a person eats lots of junk food, lots of pesticides, herbicides, things that are going to irritate the system, your body might react by producing a coating on your intestines. Now, your small intestine is where the food is absorbed into the bloodstream. So if your small intestine is coated as a reaction to the poisons you've been eating or the junk food you've eaten for 20 years, you might decide to eat some good food, and it goes in your body, goes into your intestines, and it can't be absorbed. So you might have to eat 5 times more than necessary just to get the nutrition you need. I notice when I eat good food and I take my vitamins and I am healthy, I eat less. I feel better and eat less. Some people eat too much and they feel sluggish all the time. Their system is always having to spend its energy digesting the food you put in. And if the food you put in is poor quality, the body has to work even harder to digest that. The simple sugar molecule, for instance, that comes in sugar, or in honey, is very easily digestible. The body assimilates that quickly and you get an energy boost. Whereas the compound sugars that you sprinkle on your cereal, for instance, those are a very complicated sugar, and the body has to spend energy to break it in half to get the energy. So your net gain is not nearly as much as it should have been if you were eating a simpler sugar. And so many factors. Let's talk about a few of these here. The Bible says in Genesis chapter 1, verse number 29, "Behold, I've given you every herb, and the fruit, and the seeds." God told Adam and Eve here in this verse, I want you to eat the fruit, the herbs, that's vegetables, and the seeds. Even in the book of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego asked if they could not eat the king's meat and drink the king's wine. They wanted to have pulse and water. Well, pulse is vegetables. And after 10 days, only 10 days of doing nothing but eating vegetables and water, the king's servant looked at those guys and said, "These guys are healthier than any of the rest of them we've got." So I think drinking water and eating lots of vegetables would be a great boost in our health. God told Adam and Eve to eat fruit, vegetables, and seeds. Today we eat hamburger, french fries, and Coke, and we wonder why we're sick. Your body has to run on what you put in your mouth, and it has to produce new cells that are being destroyed by what it has in your stomach. So that's you're made out of what you eat. So people often say you are what you eat. One guy said to me, "Well, I'm going to be a big hamburger then." Okay, we certainly won't be healthy if that's all you eat. In Genesis chapter 9, the Bible talks about the flesh with the life thereof, which is in the blood, which is the blood thereof. You shall not eat. God told the people here to not eat the blood. This is the only command of the Old Testament dietary laws that was never lifted. In the New Testament, they were still told not to eat the blood. I've seen people who catch fish, and when they catch the fish while the fish is alive, they hold it up and chop off the tail, so the fish bleeds all the blood out. I don't know if that's necessary or not, but they say that by getting rid of the blood from the fish, the meat is even better. I've heard that when they kill a chicken, to have a kosher chicken, the priest, the Jewish priest, will hold the chicken till it calms down and relaxes. And when it's relaxed, he tucks the head under his arm so it's in the dark. And while everything is totally relaxed, he slowly slices the chicken's throat. And so while it's relaxed, the blood all pumps out, and you end up with a cleaner meat. I don't know if that's all true or not, but I think the concept is right, that if you try to get rid of the blood, you don't eat the blood, because many diseases are carried in the blood. In Leviticus chapter 11, the Bible talks about abominations. There's 2 kinds of abominations in the Bible. Some things, the Bible says, if you do this, it will be an abomination unto you. Now, the word abomination means it will make you sick. He said, if you eat things from the water that don't have fins or scales, it'll make you sick. It's an abomination unto you. Now, this would include things that I like to eat, but I try to avoid because of this verse. Shrimp, catfish, though it tastes awful good, and I eat it, but because we're not under those laws anymore. But I think God gave this for a reason. It doesn't have fins or scales. It's not clean. This would include animals like pork or pig, and I like bacon and ham, and it's okay to eat those things scripturally. But physically, they are not good for you. You need to understand that. In Leviticus chapter 17, 1, it talks about abomination unto the Lord thy God. See, some things are an abomination unto you. It'll make you sick. Other things throughout the Scripture are an abomination unto God. Now, those things never change. If it makes God sick one day, it's going to make God sick 100 years later. So I think we need to pay attention to the difference between those two. In Exodus chapter 15, God said, if thou wilt diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God, and wilt do that which is right in his sight, and give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will put none of these diseases upon thee. He said, I am the Lord that healeth thee. I think God made a neat promise here in the book of Exodus. He said, if you will obey all my commandments, you will have none of these diseases that the Egyptians had. And this would include his commandments for cleanliness, the sanitation laws, the dietary laws, the being cheerful, having a good attitude, and all sorts of commandments that God has given. But this is a neat promise. That's the first mention, by the way, in the Bible of the word disease. God promised, I will give you none of these diseases. In James chapter 5, verse 14, he said, is any sick among you? Let him call for the elders of the church, and let them pray over him, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord. I don't understand this at all, but I do understand that the Bible does teach if you're sick and you've tried everything else, one of the routes you can ask God to heal you by asking the elders to come pray for you and anoint you with oil. I've never done this, and I know some churches get carried away on this, but I think it certainly is scriptural to do that. And it says, if you've committed sins, they shall be forgiven him. So I think maybe this anointing with oil would tie in with an examination of yourself to see, have I disobeyed God anywhere? Because if you've disobeyed some of God's laws, which it would be a sin, then maybe that's causing your problem. And maybe the anointing with oil is only to give you an opportunity to examine your heart and see if you're following God's commands. In Deuteronomy chapter 7, God said, if thou shalt keep the commandments and the statutes and the judgments which I command thee this day, if you will hearken to these judgments, I mean pay close attention to what God has said, he said, I will bless thee and multiply thee and bless the fruit of thy womb and the fruit of the land. And it goes on and on about the blessings that he will give. And you'll be blessed above all people. And he said, I will put none of these diseases. There we are again. That's the second mention of the word disease in the Bible, is in Deuteronomy chapter 7. So I think it is important that we understand what's causing diseases, and if possible, eliminate them. God told Adam to eliminate the causes, the things that we're doing wrong. God told Adam and Eve to eat the fruit, the vegetables, and the seeds. In my videotape number 1 of my seminar series, I talk about how that God told them to eat the seeds, and these seeds contain a vitamin called vitamin B17. We've got a great book on that at our ministry here called World Without Cancer, explaining how B17, people who get lots of B17 in their diet, don't get cancer. I think an awful lot of people suffer from cancer and die, and even Christians, and die excruciating deaths with incredible suffering, and they get to heaven and they say, God, why didn't you heal me? And God says, look, son or daughter, I wrote it in the first chapter of the Bible. If you'd have got that far in your family devotions, you'd have figured it out. You know, eat the seeds. The seeds contain this vitamin. I recommend if you have cancer or know someone that does, that you get them to read this book. It'll really change the way they look at cancer. It's a deficiency disease. It's not caused by a virus or bacteria or smoking or any of those other things. It's caused by a deficiency of a vitamin. The Hunzas in India or Nepal area typically live to be over 90. Their favorite food is apricot seeds, and they never get cancer. The disease scurvy was a disease caused by a lack of vitamin C. Beriberi, pellagra, rickets. Many diseases in Scripture, or diseases in history, have been caused by a lack of a vitamin. It's a vitamin deficiency. And I think we need to look at vitamins. There's two philosophies of health, creation and evolution. If the evolution story is true, then your body's nothing but a bunch of chemicals that got together by chance over billions of years. You treat diseases with a drug. If the creation story is true, then God designed the body, and you treat diseases with things God gave us to eat. Food, vitamins, minerals, herbs, natural substances. The two different philosophies, drug therapy and nutrition therapy. And they come from totally different perspectives on how they're going to heal the body. Most medical doctors are sincere men, very brilliant men, but they're trained with drug therapy. So their whole thinking is, this person is sick, give them this chemical or this drug to fix this illness. What this is doing is covering the symptom. It's not fixing the problem. If you're driving down the highway and your oil light comes on your car, you have two choices. Pull over, find and fix the problem. Add some oil or whatever. Replace the oil pump if necessary. Whatever it is, find and fix the problem. Second option you have is unplug the oil light. If you unplug the oil light, you can keep on driving. You fixed the symptom. You didn't fix the cause. And a drug fixes the symptom. If you have a headache, you say, oh, I got a headache, go take an aspirin. Okay, you just unplugged the oil light. And if you open your medicine cabinet in your house or in your bathroom or wherever it is, I think you'll see an awful lot of bottles full of stuff that unplugs the symptom. It does not fix the problem. If you open your refrigerator, you might see some things that'll fix the problem as opposed to fixing the symptom. And if you learn to look at your body as a very complex machine and realize that there's different things the body tries to tell you. There are symptoms, deficiency signs, and that can be a whole study just on deficiency signs. If you're low in a certain vitamin, you get a certain problem. If you're low in vitamin C, you might get hangnails or gums that bleed or achy muscles. That might be your body trying to tell you you're low in vitamin C. If your muscles cramp easily, especially the calf muscle, you might be low in calcium. If you get headaches easy or you have unusually stinky feet, if your sweat smells worse than it should, they say you're probably low in protein, a digestible protein. And we'll have someone on this tape who's an expert on nutrition that you can get advice from them. Just all you got to do is read off the symptoms and she'll be able to tell you, mostly correctly as far as I understand, exactly what you need, what you're deficient in. It's sort of like taking your car to an expert mechanic. He can oftentimes just listen to it and say, oh, you need this and this and this. Well, if he's got years of experience working on cars, he can do that kind of thing. Whereas if a person has lots of experience working with the body from a nutritional standpoint, you can oftentimes just tell them your symptoms and they'll tell you what you need. And they may not always be right, but at least it's the right way to start, I think. The Bible says in Psalm 104, bread strengthens man's heart. If bread strengthens your heart, we need to look at how bread used to be when this verse was written. It used to be they had to bake bread fresh every day. About 150 years ago or so, they learned if they took out the vitamin E and the lecithin, the bread would last longer. And so they got more profits. Now the bread didn't go bad sitting on the shelf by taking out these vitamins. So they invented white flour, white bread. I tell the kids there's a simple formula. The whiter the bread, the quicker you're dead. If all you ever eat is white bread, you're not getting anything to strengthen your heart. You need to get vitamin E and lecithin. And there's all sorts of different types of vitamins and different companies. And I'm not selling any vitamins and don't want to sell any vitamins. But I think you'd be wise to learn some about it and to take some. There's a great book called Alive and Well about how a doctor in California uses just simply nutrition to treat all sorts of diseases. Many people have healed themselves of various diseases just by changing their diet. George Malcolmus used to be in Edson, Tennessee, now moved to North Carolina. George Malcolmus has a great book called God's Way to Ultimate Health. He used to have people come in, he still does, I guess, gives his diet where people can get cured of some unbelievable diseases. I saw a man a few months ago, I was preaching in Louisiana. The guy walked up to me and I said, man, I didn't recognize you. You've lost weight. He said, yep, I've lost 50 pounds and I feel better than I've ever felt in my life. I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm on George Malcolmus's diet. I said, you're kidding. He said, no, that's all I'm doing. I'm following his diet and I feel the best I've ever felt in my life. So I don't need to lose 50 pounds, maybe a couple, but I haven't tried the diet. But basically, he gets rid of certain things out of the diet. You just don't eat certain things, period, because they're bad for you. And you might want to get that book. As far as treating cancer, many people have just changed their diet and healed their cancer, eliminated it totally. The cancer survival rate, as this chart shows, is pretty low for those who take traditional treatment. Those who have primary cancer have about 12% survival rate for surviving 5 years or more if they go with conventional therapy. If they go with nutritional therapy, there's an 80% survival rate. So I think we're treating this disease, cancer, from a totally wrong perspective here in this country. Here they are looking for a way to cut it out or burn it out or blast it out. Or, man, give the body what it needs to rebuild. Give it some nutrition. If your car is low on a product like oil or brake fluid or something else, there'll be a deficiency sign, and then there'll be a full-blown problem if you don't fix it. Your body will give you an early warning sign when you're low in a vitamin. If you don't fix it, it'll give you a disease. If you still don't fix it, you'll die. A lot of people died. 1 million sailors died of scurvy, and it could have been fixed by a vitamin. Now, when somebody says, I take vitamins, I right away ask them, what kind do you take? And they will typically give me the name of a company, One A Day or Fred Flintstone or something like that. I say, no, I don't mean what brand, what kind. Because there are 3 different kinds of food supplements, or vitamins as they're called. There are synthetic vitamins, there are natural vitamins, and there are live vitamins. A good way to explain this is if you wanted to fill up your church for a meeting, you can go to the store and pick out all the mannequins, the dummies, out of the windows, dress them up, bring them to church, set them in the pew. Church is full, and they look real, but they're synthetic. They're fake. They won't tithe. They won't sing. They just help fill the church. Many vitamins that people take that they buy at the store are synthetic. They're fake. They're man's attempt in the laboratory to do what God did in the real world. They're not going to do you much good. The second type of vitamin is natural vitamins. Again, if you want to fill your church, you can go to the mortuary and get 50 bodies and dress them up in suits and set them in the pew. They don't sing. They don't tithe. They just raise a stink after a while. What you have done, though, you have filled your church with 100% natural bodies, but they're dead. A lot of vitamins that people take are 100% natural, but they're dead because of the way they were processed. And it's an easy test you can do at home on your own. Get some corn. If you're going to plant corn in your garden, take the seeds, divide them into 2 piles. Take pile A and cook it. Then go plant it. Take pile B and just plant it. You'll find the seeds from pile A do not grow because they've been destroyed in the cooking. Now, under the microscope, they probably would still look nearly identical. And many people sell natural vitamins that look good under the microscope and come from a natural source, but they killed them in the processing. If you took oranges and squeezed the juice out, put the juice in a bowl and boiled it to get rid of the water, and packed the residue into tablets, you would have 100% natural vitamin C. But it's dead. You killed it when you cooked it. To get vitamins that are still alive or haven't been destroyed in processing is much more expensive. So most of the companies that produce good quality vitamins that really are alive don't even bother selling them through stores because nobody'd buy them. I mean, if you went to the store and saw a bottle of vitamin C for $3 and next to it's a bottle of vitamin C for $5, people don't take time to understand. Maybe the $5 one is still alive. They took the extra care to keep it alive in processing. So I think you'd be wise to understand some of the things about nutrition and vitamins and get the good quality stuff. And I'm not selling anything and don't want to sell anything. But I have for years taken Shaklee vitamins and I highly recommend them. They are the largest vitamin company in the world. As far as I know the world, I know in America. And they never advertise. They just they produce a quality product that is as close to nature as possible. They do the least amount of processing as possible. And all I can tell you is they work. I take them and I feel good. You need to find out what your body needs. And you can do that by studying deficiency signs. Okay, if you're sick, several steps I would take. If I had a disease or a problem, I would go through several steps. First of all, I would check to see if there's a cause that I can eliminate. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. Maybe it's my diet. Maybe it's my attitude. Maybe it's not enough rest. Maybe it's too much stress. I would eliminate all of the possible things that I can understand that I might be doing to cause it. Secondly, if that didn't work, I would pray and say, God, would you please take this away? Just take it away from me, God. Paul was given a thorn in the flesh, and he prayed and said, Lord, please take it away. He besought the Lord 3 times, asked him, please take this away. God didn't take it away. He said, my grace is sufficient for thee. You can live with this, Paul. And Paul had to go through life suffering. Even Jesus on the cross, or before he went to the cross, said, Father, if thou be willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. It may not be God's will to heal you of your suffering or pain. My good friend John Bishop in Triple S Christian Ranch in Heber Springs, Arkansas, has gone through incredible suffering. And God has used that in his life to teach him many things. He's just been such a great godly Christian. He was before, but this has really done something to him, changed him in a very positive way. The suffering has been good for him. And so if I did everything I could to get rid of the possible sources of my causing it, I'd ask God to take it away. If he didn't take it away, I'd learn to live with it. I'd probably go and have the pastor of the church, I'd ask him to anoint me with oil. The Bible says to do that. But ultimately, you might just have to learn to live with it. To say, God, okay, I'll just accept it and keep on serving you. Job, after all the problems he went through, said, Lord, I don't understand all this, but even if you slay me, I'm still going to serve you. I'm going to serve you no matter what you do to me, God. And so if you're suffering in this world and you've eliminated all the causes and you're still suffering and you prayed and they anointed you with oil, well then live with it. Keep serving God. Don't get angry about it. Because what can happen is we often get confidence in the flesh. The Bible says don't have any confidence in the flesh. Philippians chapter 3. Paul said have no confidence in the flesh. Now, In 3 John, we were told, I want you to prosper, I want you to be in health. And I think you'd be wise to understand your body and try to do what you can to be healthy. As the population of this world grows and grows and grows, it's harder and harder to feed everybody and clothe everybody and house everybody. And it's getting a little tougher these days to maintain good health and get good food supply. But I think if it's God's will most of the time for us to prosper and be in health. If you do all these things and you get good health, use it for God. I see some people, I saw a guy sitting on a tailgate of his truck one day. I was out knocking on doors, witnessing, inviting people to church, and he was sitting there on the tailgate of his truck, a massive, muscular guy, and you could tell something was bothering him, and I said, "Sir, what's the problem?" He said, "Well, my wife is leaving me." I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, she says I don't spend enough time with her." I said, "Well, sir, let me ask you a question. How much time do you spend working out at the gym?" He said, "Oh, 3 hours a day." And it showed. I mean, he was muscular. But he lost his wife. That's not worth it. My preacher preached a whole year of sermons one time. Every sermon had the same title, different message, but tremendous messages. The title of his sermon was, "They got what they wanted, but they lost what they had." Adam wanted that fruit off the tree. He got it, but he lost what he had. Many people got what they wanted and lost what they had. He went all through the Bible showing how people got what they wanted, but lost what they had. And some people work hours and hours and days and years to get good health, and they get it, but they lose their fellowship with God. They spend all their emphasis on the body. Oh, don't do that. Take care of your body. But the purpose of keeping the body going good is so you can do more for God with your life. We're going to put some interviews on here now with some nutrition experts and some chiropractors and things who are really can give you some good advice on how you can be healthy. And I recommend you listen carefully to what they have to say. But keep it all in perspective. This is only the body. You got to keep your spirit in tune with God, and your social life with your friends and neighbors. Whether you're healthy or not, you can still keep that in mind, and keep growing mentally like Jesus did in Luke 2:52. Thank you so much for joining us. Jenny, what are some things you can do to achieve good health? If a person wants to be healthy, what can they do? Give us some pointers on that, please.
Okay, I think it's wonderful that we can do something to achieve good health, and it is a choice. We can do something to change the way we feel, and the steps are really simple and logical. And basically there are 3. First is to have a good positive attitude and to learn to control and minimize stress, because stress is a major cause of disease and a major factor in illness. And the Bible says it pretty simply, do not be anxious about anything. That is, it's a challenge, but we can do that. Secondly, of course, exercise is critical, adequate exercise and adequate rest along with it, especially the rest for children. Sometimes we expect our children to be healthy and they don't get enough sleep. And then the third is to make sure you do get proper nutrition. In the area of nutrition, the Bible speaks often and specifically about diet. God gave His people in Leviticus some pretty specific, precise, in fact, incredibly precise laws and rules regulating diet and cleanliness. And in Daniel, the 4 Hebrew children refused the king's rich food and had a diet of just vegetables and water, if I remember correctly, and really thrived. And I think God expects us to maintain our health by feeding our bodies appropriately. And to me, it's strange that we spend more time thinking about what we put on our bodies most of the time than what we put in our bodies, and we expect our bodies to function at full performance, sometimes with no more than a coffee and donut or a diet soda for breakfast, and many people skip meals totally and expect to think correctly and to be able to function properly. You wouldn't expect your car to run without gas, and you wouldn't, or proper maintenance with it. And I believe God could have made our bodies that would function forever without any fuel, but He didn't do that. And He set up some specific laws that have cause and effect, the sum of which we call the science of nutrition. And if we ignore those laws, we reap the consequences, usually in illness and poor health, disease, even premature death.
Are there some basic rules we can follow in order to be healthy or understand what our body needs as far as nutrition goes and things like that?
Yes, there are, and you don't have to be an expert to do it either. Again, they're simple, and the first one is to eat foods as natural, or choose foods as close to natural as possible. And we do have a choice when we go grocery shopping. We can either choose God-made foods or man-made foods. And it's pretty easy to tell the difference. The God-made foods were once alive. They either grew in the soil, or they swam in the ocean, or they walked on hoof or flew by wing. And they're usually available in the produce sections, or in the meat sections, the dairy section. The man-made food are in boxes and bags throughout the center of the grocery store aisle. And an example would be a baked potato versus a boxed potato. So, you know, people will think, okay, when I choose my food, is it as natural or as close to natural as it could possibly be? And a second rule of thumb in that area would also be to eat foods as live as possible. Now, you might say, what are live foods? Well, cooked foods are dead foods. And anytime you heat a food to 130 degrees or more, you begin to destroy the enzymes and the vitamins. Vitamins are living, and they are destroyed by heat and oxygen and even cold. And so it's important to, every nutritionist agrees that you should eat from 1/3 to 2/3, or from 1/2 to 2/3 of your diet in its raw, original form. And then also you should eat foods as whole as possible. A good example of that would be an orange rather than orange juice, or reconstituted orange juice. So think natural, live, and whole. Good health is not just a matter of what we get, but it's also a matter of what we don't get. So it's important in choosing our foods to avoid the poisons, not only in food, but in the water and the air too. And in foods, it's important to read labels, and there are probably more than 30,000, maybe 300,000 chemicals in foods, and most of them have not been tested for toxicity. In fact, recent research shows that things we find commonly in food, like monosodium glutamate, nitrates, nitrites, even aspartame, are responsible for causing some pretty serious health effects right now. And in the area of water, we're supposed to drink 1/2 our body weight in ounces of water. In other words, if you weigh 100 pounds, drink 50 ounces of water per day. But it needs to be pure water, because there's so many chemicals in water today that to have good health, you have to have the water, but it needs to be good water. And as far as air, there's not a lot you can do to control the air you breathe, but inside your homes you can, by using household products that aren't full of chemicals and toxins, and there are ways that you can cut down on that too. And then the third rule in that area is to make sure that we do get the proper, get nutrition in proper amount.
Can taking supplements, vitamin supplements, reduce the incidence of illness in the human body?
It sure can. In fact, the USDA published a study that said if every single person in the United States would just make sure they get the recommended daily allowance, now called the daily values of essential nutrients, we could change our health picture and reduce heart disease by 25%, 50% fewer infant and maternal deaths, 50% reduction in arthritis, 50% avoided or improved cases of diabetes, a 75% reduction in osteoporosis, an 80% reduction in obesity, just to name a few. And again, this is from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And it's an old report. I would guess if they did that study again, that they would have a significant reduction in cancer and some of the other diseases that are plaguing our nation today.
What do we need to do to get 100% of the recommended daily value, or the recommended daily allowance? What do we need to do?
According to the food pyramid, the current food pyramid, you'd have to eat 6 to 11 pieces, servings of bread, cereal, rice, pasta, and of course whole grain, because white flour really doesn't have very much nutrition in it. 3 to 5 servings of vegetables, 2 to 4 servings of fruit, 2 to 3 servings of milk, dairy, yogurt, cheese, things like that, and 2 to 3 servings of meat, poultry, fish, dry beans, eggs, or nutrition. Eggs or nuts. I don't know very many people who do that. Do you?
No, I'd have to eat all day long.
That's right.
Are there certain particular supplements we should be taking to make sure we're getting what our body needs?
First of all would be a multivitamin. It's like buying insurance on your body, that no matter what you eat today, you're going to get all the major nutrients and the micronutrients that your body has to have. It's balancing body chemistry, basically. and I'm not doing these in any order because I'm not sure there is an order, but fiber is important too. We need 25 to 30 grams of fiber a day. Most Americans get 7 to 10. And do you know colon cancer, the #1 cancer killer, is 100% preventable if Americans would just get 25 to 30 grams of fiber in their diet a day. And that's not easy to do without supplementation. In fact, I think it's impossible. Calcium is another one that even the AMA says is critical today because we're facing an epidemic of osteoporosis, which is nothing more than a lifelong calcium deficiency. And calcium is really, really hard to pull from our foods. We really don't assimilate very much of the calcium that's in food today. B vitamins are critical, and we suggest a B complex. Folic acid has been studied recently to prevent birth defects, and every woman of childbearing age should be taking it before they conceive because it's at the time of conception that it's necessary. And also B vitamins prevent a buildup of something called homocysteine in the cells, and this buildup causes cellular damage which can lead to heart disease and a myriad of other degenerative diseases, and B vitamins keep that from happening. Also, all Americans should be taking antioxidants. That's vitamin C, E, and beta-carotene to prevent free radical damage in the body. And these vitamins, in small amounts, in the regular RDAs or daily values, they prevent vitamin deficiency diseases like scurvy or rickets. But in greater amounts, and sometimes 10 to 100 times greater than the RDA, they act as protectors in the body and therefore reducing the risk of cancer, heart disease, the ravages of aging, and even premature death. Protein, especially soy protein, is a nutrient that's had a lot of research lately concerning the phytochemicals that have been discovered in that product. And if you get a good soy product that contains active phytochemicals and isoflavones, then it does help prevent certain types of cancer, including breast cancer and colon cancer and prostate cancer. It automatically lowers cholesterol about 20% just naturally. It reduces menopausal symptoms. In fact, in Japan, where their diet is where they get about 95 grams of soy a day in their diet, there's not even a word for hot flash in the Japanese language. People who take soy or who have an adequate amount of soy in their diet have stronger bones and better kidney function. And a side benefit is that it stabilizes blood sugar and you have more energy. You just feel better when you're taking it. And I do want to say real quickly, too, that it's important to note that all food supplements are not created equal. And in the area of a soy protein, it must be water washed, not alcohol washed, or the isoflavones are destroyed in processing. So it is important. And in the area of vitamins, too, the same criteria that we placed on food, natural, alive, and whole, should be placed on the vitamin. It needs to be, in my opinion, a natural, whole, live, and that means not heat-processed supplement.
What about over-the-counter drugs? Many people take drugs. Is there a vitamin or a supplement they could take instead for certain problems or symptoms?
There are some natural alternatives to medicine cabinet drugs that most people keep in their medicine cabinet. These are herbal remedies. Herbs are different than vitamins. Vitamins feed and nourish the body. Herbs really act medicinally, and there are a number of them that are safe. Some of them aren't safe, but the ones that I'm going to mention have been proven throughout centuries. In fact, in other countries are used generally in preference to drug treatment. Things like garlic. Garlic is a natural antibiotic and will act not only against bacteria but against a virus, and it'll bring down fever, lower blood pressure, protect against cancer. In fact, it's the #1 food that is being studied by cancer researchers right now that they're through with beta-carotene and vitamin A. And another one would be echinacea. Echinacea is an herb that boosts the immune system and could be used for cold and flu symptoms. It activates the white blood cells and it increases resistance to infection. It really, really makes a difference when someone is coming down with a cold or something. You start taking echinacea immediately, and very often you can avert that illness. Stomach problems, rather than Tums for the tummy, something like peppermint ginger. Peppermint ginger does a great job with nausea or bloating or any type of digestive disorder. Valerian in place of sleeping pills. Valerian is an herb that has been proven to not only help you go to sleep faster, but help you stay asleep and sleep deeper. In fact, you can sleep a shorter period of time and wake up feeling like you've slept double the amount of hours. It's great. Ginkgo biloba for memory loss. Ginkgo, when we get older, we say, well, I just can't think the way I used to. And it's true, we probably can't because we're not getting the same oxygen supply to brain cells. And what ginkgo biloba does is help increase the circulation to the brain, and thereby you do think better and your memory functions better. And a side benefit is that it also helps prevent the risk of stroke. Ginseng boosts energy, and it's a stress adaptogen, and that's another area where it's important to know what you're getting, because there are probably 30 different kinds of ginseng, but only 2 of them really make a difference. And ginseng, sometimes you'll see it listed as a fad herb, but that's probably because they haven't gotten hold of the right kind of ginseng, because it really does make a difference. It stimulates the nervous system too. So if you're tired and you need a boost, ginseng's the thing to head for. Glucosamine is another one that's been well studied and well researched, and it definitely rebuilds joint cartilage. Great product for someone who suffers from joint pain, and not even someone who has arthritis, just someone who runs on a daily basis or who has joint pain in the legs or knees or back or whatever. Glucosamine really helps. Depression is a real problem in our country today. In fact, I think it's one of the #1 drugs is Prozac, and there is an alternative that's natural, that has no side effects and completely safe, and it's called St. John's wort, and it really works. Prostate problems, saw palmetto works better than any prostate drug on the market, better even than surgery to reduce the symptoms associated with that. Women who have PMS, there's a supplement called, an herb called gamma-linolenic acid, which is, we call it GLA for short, and it definitely reduces premenstrual symptoms. It's an anti-inflammatory, and it works rather than taking an anti-inflammatory. It's an omega-3 fatty acid, as is EPA, and both of them really do a good job in that area. So those are just a few of the things that you can use in place of the more commonly used medicine cabinet drugs that we seem to head for.
What about over-the-counter drugs? Many people take drugs. Is there a vitamin or a supplement they could take instead for certain problems or symptoms?
Everybody's different, and we're all as different nutritionally as our fingerprints. And nutrients, really, sometimes we think that we have a headache, we take an aspirin. We have a stomach ache, we take Tums. But nutrients don't work that way. They work together like an orchestra rather than a solo. So it does seem that we do have to take more than just one thing. That's why I recommend a multivitamin, multimineral. That gives you a good basis. And that, along with a good protein product to make sure, especially soy, generally will give you, the average person who's in good health, that's probably enough, as long as the multi contains an adequate amount of B vitamins and calcium and the antioxidants.
What does your body tell you if you're low in the B vitamins? And there are quite a few different B vitamins, maybe 30 or so. What is the symptoms that you're low in the B vitamins?
Chapped lips is probably a quick, lots of people have chapped lips and never think about it being a vitamin deficiency, but it is. But things like dizziness or fatigue, irritability, depression, craving sweets can be a B vitamin deficiency. Skin problems, dry, rough skin can be a B vitamin deficiency. Muscle cramps, by the way, can be B vitamin deficiency too. So, it is hard to kind of pinpoint what it is. Heart palpitations, mood swings can be a B vitamin deficiency, because B is a stress vitamin, and it also is an energy vitamin. B is required to produce energy from foods. So any problem in the area of fatigue, you look for B also.
All right, and what are the deficiency signs of a person who's low in vitamin C?
If you bruise easily, you have a vitamin C deficiency. An eye problem could be a C deficiency. Bleeding gums or nosebleeds could be a C deficiency.
What one thing would you say is the most important in order to be healthy?
I think the most important thing to remember is that your health is your responsibility. It's not your doctor's. And so many people today depend on their doctor to tell them what to do. And doctors really aren't trained in preventing disease. They're trained to cure it. And yes, when you get sick, go to your doctor. But try to do something on your own you can make a difference in the way you feel today, and you can make a difference in your health by what you do today, even 20 years from now. And I won't quote this exactly because I don't remember the exact quote and couldn't find it when I came, but Dr. Linus Pauling, who's won the Nobel Prize twice, said that you can increase your life expectancy by an average of even up to 24 years by making some changes, essentially nutritional. And even older people can make a difference in not just life expectancy, but the quality of life by eating correctly, by managing stress, by exercising, drinking plenty of water, and getting adequate rest, and taking food supplements.
I understand there's a new product that helps reduce wrinkles. The picture you showed me was incredible of the wrinkle reduction on one side of a man's face after using this for 7 weeks. Tell us about that, please.
Growing out of Shackley's research on antioxidant vitamins, we learned that the skin does not receive any of the antioxidant vitamins that are taken orally. So we put together a team of cosmetic researchers to find a way to hold antioxidant vitamins together stable in a cream where when you put them on your face, they actually delivered the nutrients to your skin cells. Thus the name Infusel, because it actually infuses 7 antioxidant nutrients into the skin cells. And the purpose was to stop the accelerated aging in the skin. And it does do that. It blocks every known cause of accelerated aging. It was a surprise to us, though, during the largest clinical study ever done on a skincare product to find that not only did it block the causes of accelerated aging, but it reversed the visible damage that had been done. In fact, in 2 weeks, we saw a reduction of fine lines. In 4 weeks, with one of the creams, a 421% reduction in wrinkles, and a 154% increase in skin firmness or elasticity. And the picture that you're looking at is a man who put it on, he decided to use it on one half of his face and really test it. And what happened, you can see, is the result of 7 weeks of using it just on one half of his face. And he was so impressed with the results that he went to a professional photographer to record it. We are presenting this line to the American Board of Dermatology in March at their next board meeting, because we're also seeing some remarkable healing effects take place. People with rosacea, people with even skin cancers are seeing some changes that are very beneficial with the introduction of the antioxidant nutrients. It's pretty exciting.
Well, Jenny, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you stopping on your way through Pensacola to visit us, and it's been good to see you again. And I'd like you to know if people have questions about nutrition and health. A lot of people, the subject is too complicated for them. It's like there's so much to learn. There's so many vitamins out there, and I don't want to learn it all. I just wanted somebody to tell me what to do. Can people call you and ask you questions? I know you're not the world's expert, but the smartest person I know on the subject. And can people call you and ask questions about their health and what they can do? And what is your phone number, if you would, please?
I may not be able to answer all their questions, but I would certainly welcome the call, and I usually know where to look to find answers if I don't know them.
And what is your number there in Arkansas?
1-800-345-1140.
All right.
Okay.
Well, thank you for joining us. My name is Kent Hovind from Pensacola, Florida, and this is Dr. Larry Tyler from Washington, Missouri. And he's a chiropractor.
Yes.
How long have you been in chiropractic?
I've been a chiropractor for 15 years now.
15 years.
15 years.
I have been to thousands of chiropractors, and you fixed my back, brother. It was awesome. So I thought I'd put together a video on the Bible and health. And you call your seminar, when you speak on this topic, Polar Bears, Bumblebees, and Healthcare. Why is that?
Well, the story of the polar bears comes about trying to open up people's minds.
Okay.
We have been brainwashed. We've been brainwashed in lots of areas of our lives, and healthcare is not an exception to that rule. The polar bear story goes like this. The city of Denver was given a gift back in the early 80s. It was a polar bear cub. and it was shipped to them in a transport cage. And this polar bear cub had the room to take about 3.5 shuffle steps in one direction, and it kind of turned around and took 3.5 shuffle steps back the other way. And that was all the room that this polar bear cub had. Well, the people who know polar bears went to the city of Denver and said, hey, you better get this polar bear out of this cage real soon, otherwise it's going to suffer damage that's going to last a lifetime. Well, in the infinite wisdom of bureaucracy, it took about 8 years for them to complete the building of the Denver Zoo. And the big day came around, they had their polar bear exhibit all ready to go, and meanwhile this polar bear had spent the last 8 years taking 3.5 shuffle steps and then 3.5 shuffle steps back, because that's all the room it had now. Well, the day came around, they opened up the new exhibit, and they opened up the door, and what happened? The polar bear took 3.5 steps, stopped, and then took 3.5 shuffle steps back. And to this day, that bear is still at the Denver Zoo, and all it does is take 3.5 shuffle steps forward and 3.5 shuffle steps back. It has been so programmed that its entire universe at this point is based on the polar bear cage.
Okay.
Everywhere it looks, it sees the polar bear cage.
All right.
Now, they've been able to distract the polar bear every now and then. If they give it a big old salmon, okay, or give it a pine tree to play with, well, it can get distracted and it will kind of wander out of its zone a little bit. But the very next day, it's back to the same old way because that's the way it's always done things. That's been its entire existence. Well, for the last 150 years now, our entire healthcare system has been based on allopathic principles. Okay, feel bad, take a pill. Feel real bad, take another pill. And if it gets real bad, then we'll just cut it out.
Right.
And that's the whole mindset of healthcare in the United States these days. So I tell people the polar bear story in order to challenge them to open up their mind. If all you're going to go through life is looking at the polar bear cage, okay, then you're never going to change any of the patterns and any of the things that's happening.
Right.
And the state of health right now in the United States is not exactly anything to be proud of.
Correct.
I mean, we spend a whole lot of money on healthcare, but we're ranked 20th or 21st in the list of industrialized nations as far as the healthcare of our population is concerned. We have more diseases now than we've ever had. Cancer and autoimmune diseases are running through the roof. Okay, we are living a little bit older, but that's not because we're healthier. We're living a little bit older because we've gotten pretty good at repairing trauma, and that's caused a statistical shift. Okay, so I start off with polar bears, just trying to challenge people to open up their minds and not fall into the polar bear cage. Another way I've analogized that is, you know, if you get in a boat in St. Louis and you travel downstream, well, you end up in New Orleans. And if you get back up in the boat in St. Louis and go downstream, you end up in New Orleans. You know, and every time you get in a boat in St. Louis and go downstream, you're going to end up in New Orleans.
Right.
And that's okay if you want to go to New Orleans. But if you want to end up someplace different, say Chicago, okay, well then you better do something other than get in a boat underneath the arch and travel downstream. And that's what's happening. You know, every 20 years or so, the medical community comes out with a new magic bullet. You know, here, take this pill, it's going to cause our problem or solve our problems. And then another 20 years later, they'll come back and say, well, we've got a new drug to solve that problem, and we've got a new drug to solve that problem. And we've gone through several generations of antibiotics and pain relievers and all these other drug therapies, and we keep ending up in the same place, unhealthy and sick.
Right.
Dying of chronic diseases that we really shouldn't be dealing with at this point.
Well, and they keep making money along the way.
Oh, and they keep making money along the way, absolutely. Matter of fact, this year in 1998, the pharmaceutical companies were kind of bragging that they made more money in the first 6 months of this year, a percentage increase, than they've ever had in the history of the pharmaceutical industries.
I read a great book on how Rockefeller used to sell oil, regular crude oil, as you know, snake oil basically.
Yeah, exactly.
To heal everything, cure all. And that's how he got rich.
Oh, yeah.
Selling bottles of this stuff, and he really has got a profound influence on the pharmaceuticals.
Yeah. The pharmaceutical industry is, well, I mean, first off, it's being regulated by the FDA, which is made up of former pharmaceutical executives.
Sure.
Okay, so you know, you've got the proverbial fox watching the hen house, and what happens is you know, they come up with a new drug. They've just spent millions of dollars, maybe billions of dollars, developing this new chemical compound. Okay, and it may be beneficial for altering some chemical states, change the way the body's working. Okay, but that doesn't make it beneficial to the whole system.
Right.
You know, a lot of times we are dying from our cures as opposed to dying from our diseases.
Oh, that's the truth.
And the pharmaceutical industry is right in the middle of that. That's just where their head is.
Well, as a creationist, of course, I'm interested in how God fits into all this. The Bible says, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth.
Yes.
So if God created it, He must have a plan, must have an order to it. And I teach in my seminars that God told Adam and Eve what to eat and what not to eat. And you and I have been talking earlier about how that the whole world is made up of simply a few basic atoms.
The universe as we know it is made up of 96 elements.
Right.
And those are all the pieces that he used to make everything.
Similar to 26 letters of the alphabet make all the books ever written in English.
Yes.
And the same basic elements make up all the structures of the universe. And the human body, you said, has basically a pretty high percentage of just a few of these elements.
Right. And basically, 96% of the human body is made up of 4 different elements.
Okay.
Okay. The other 4% is made up of 22 others.
Okay.
Okay. So the basic design and building of our system is made up of 26 elements. Now we use a few more in its everyday maintenance and running of it.
Right.
Okay, the fuel, if you will.
Sure.
Okay, but the building blocks is basically consisting of 26 elements.
See, the Bible says God made man of the dust of the ground.
Yes, and breathed life into him.
And breathed life into him. So we're just made out of the dust of the ground. Now the systems of the body, there's numerous different systems. And when I taught biology and anatomy, I compared it to a car. You can study a car system by system. Study the brake system. Study the propulsion system. Study whatever. And then you learn how to integrate the systems.
Right.
And that's probably the simplest way to learn the human body, too, is study a few systems and then see how they tie together.
Exactly.
Tell us of your specialty, or what do you like studying about that?
Well, my specialty is that of a chiropractor. The chiropractic profession is based on the knowledge that the central nervous system is responsible for controlling and coordinating all the functions and all the structures of the human body.
Right.
Everything that takes place in the human body is controlled or coordinated by the nervous system. The function of the spinal column and the skull is to protect that nervous system. Okay, when the spinal column and the skull become distorted, okay, minor distortions, it interferes with the function of the neurological system. And as soon as you start interfering with the function of the neurological system, then whatever is being controlled or coordinated by that nervous system cannot properly function.
So if you have 4 brake lines going to each wheel of your car, one of them is pinched. That wheel doesn't stop.
That wheel no longer responds to you pushing on that brake pedal the way it's supposed to.
And if part of your nervous system is pinched, for lack of a better word, whatever it controls cannot respond.
Exactly. I've analogized the nervous system like a command center. If you had a general of an army, okay, and he was sitting in the central location, and he had all these outposts spread throughout his region, and he had messengers that brought messages back and forth from the command center to those outposts. Okay, and if there was an invading army attacking one of the outposts, well, then that outpost would send a message to the commander, and the commander would now direct his reinforcements over to that side of the attack.
Right.
Okay, and depending on where the information came from, the general would know where to send his extra troops. Okay, well, if that communication line got broken, okay, that outpost would now become vulnerable to attacks.
Sure.
It would start breaking down. Okay, the army that was attacking him would have a better ability to overcome it. Okay, it would not be able to get its supplies to maintain itself. It would not be able to get the reinforcements it needs to attack the invading army. Okay, well, that's the way our nervous system works with all of our bodily parts. Most of the infectious agents that we deal with in our world are referred to as opportunistic organisms.
Sure.
They only affect the weak host, and they only affect the weakest part of the weak host. Okay, and that directly implies response of the system. If you get an invading organism, say a bacteria or a virus, okay, and it's breathed in through our nose, and our sensory membranes and sensory nerve endings up into the nasal cavity and things like that sends a message to the brain saying we've got an invading organism in here. And then the brain can respond appropriately to it. It can increase the secretion of the mucous membranes. Okay, it can increase circulation so that there's more blood flow to it.
Right.
It can increase the activity of things such as the spleen and the medullary cavities and the lymph system in order to fight the infection more effectively. But if that message is never received by the brain, then all those functions don't take place. And that makes an infection, that allows an opportunistic organism to get in there and take hold, okay, and start causing signs of ill health and dysfunction.
So what most people do is they worry about attacking that organism instead of building up the immune system.
Exactly. It's treating the symptom.
Treating the symptom.
It's treating the symptom. A good analogy I like to use is if you're driving down the road and the red light comes on the dash. They're called idiot lights for a reason.
Right.
Okay, because if you're only waiting for the red light to come on and you're not paying any attention to any of the early warning signs, okay, then you're not taking care of the car the way you're supposed to.
Correct.
Okay?
Right.
Well, if you're driving down the road and a little red light comes on that says you're low on oil, you pull off to the side of the road, and at that point you have 2 options. You can get in the car and check the oil, and if it's low, you certainly can add a little bit of oil to the car, and that fixes the problem. And you can drive down the road and not have another care. Or you can get to the side of the road and you can find the plug that goes to the little red light.
Unplug the light.
And you unplug the light. If you unplug the light, once again, you've gotten rid of your symptom. The red light is gone. But that doesn't mean the car is working any better. And so you drive on down the road, and then next thing you know, you're throwing a rod, and now you have a major problem that started from a simple little problem. And that's what we're dealing with so much of our healthcare problems today.
Right.
From, you know, our children get exposed to their first antibiotic before they're 1 hour old. We wash infants' eyes out now with antibiotics. We used to use silver nitrate. And now we do that just in case the mother has some sort of venereal disease.
Right.
But instead, of course, checking the mothers to make sure, you know, to see whether or not they fall into that category, they're just going to wash out all the infant's eyes.
Yeah.
Another good use of resource.
Sure.
Okay, I mean, gee, a $10 dose of antibiotics, and there's 3 million babies born every year. Okay,
That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money for the pharmaceutical industries. And so they get their first dose of antibiotics when they're less than an hour old, and then before they're a day old, they get their first shot of vaccinations. Okay, in which they're getting injected with a foreign substance, a virus, the hepatitis virus, and at the same time they're also getting exposed to things such as formaldehyde and mercury and aluminum, which are known toxins to the human body. Formaldehyde's a known carcinogen. Nobody would even consider feeding a teaspoon of formaldehyde to their little baby. Okay, but yet we're injecting it directly into their bloodstream when they're less than a day old. Aluminum and mercury are known toxins to the nervous system. Okay, they've been linked to things such as autism, attention deficit disorders, Alzheimer's. Okay, all sorts of mental handicaps are associated with the accumulation of aluminum and mercury in the nervous tissue.
Can that come from cooking in aluminum pans?
Well, that was one of our first concerns.
Sure.
Okay, was whether or not when we first identified the aluminum concentration in Alzheimer's patients. I mean, we started down this pathway. We checked our antiperspirants. Okay, antiperspirants contain aluminum chlorohydrate. But they did some studies on that, and that didn't seem to be a major factor. And then we started looking at our soda cans and our cooking utensils. Okay, and yes, when you heat up aluminum, a little bit of those aluminum molecules are pulled off of that
Right.
compound, and it does get absorbed into the food. Excuse me. And that, you know, that can provide a little bit of aluminum into the system, but that didn't even seem to be the major culprit. At which point they thought, well, then this aluminum thing is just a coincidence. Well, they forgot to check one other area, and that was our vaccinations.
Putting it straight into the blood.
Putting it straight into the blood. When we take in a foreign substance, be it a bacteria or a toxic mineral or something like that, and we bring it in through normal means, the mucous membranes, the digestive tract, those areas are lined with lymphatic tissues, okay, that are designed to deal with those substances. Okay, but when we inject it directly into the bloodstream, we short circuit all those things,
Right.
and suddenly you have, you know, toxic metals circulating through the bloodstream.
Well, see, you can drink snake venom, many types of snake, and it won't hurt you.
Right.
Your system can digest it, but you put it into the blood, it'll kill you.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's a great analogy to realize that people, here we are giving this to the kids when they're born.
14 times between the ages of 0 and 2 years old, we inject our children. Actually, it's recently been updated to 15 recommended shots. Okay, and every one of them contains aluminum and mercury. And all of our so-called new safe vaccines contain formaldehyde.
Okay, now, if I was the devil, to get a big picture of the whole thing, the devil hates humanity.
Yes.
He wants to kill everybody for several reasons. We're made in the image of God, and he hates us because of that, because he wanted to be God. Isaiah 14 talks about that. And also, the prophecy in Genesis chapter 3 was that the seed of the woman would bruise the head of the serpent. So Satan knows that one of these human beings is going to come along and destroy him. So his rationale is, well, I'll just kill them all.
Right.
That's what he tried with Herod, at killing all the babies at the time of Christmas.
Exactly.
Okay, just kill them all. And so he really wants to destroy humanity. And I think there's a multi-pronged attack to destroy humanity physically, emotionally, spiritually, financially. And if you look at the scriptures carefully, the Bible gives us loads of clues to warn us about these traps that are out there. And the physical realm is one that so many Christians read their Bible, they pray, they go to church, they win souls, but they don't take care of their health.
Yeah. They're missing an important aspect, okay, of our existence.
My Sunday school teacher used to say, your spirit has to live in your body.
Right.
So you better
take care of your body.
Now you can go overboard on that. Some people, do nothing but the body.
Right.
Right. Bodybuilders, which is not necessarily bad, but there's more to life.
Right. We are charged to keep the body balanced the way God intended it. Okay. the scientific community, healthcare providers are taught there are three aspects to our life. That is the chemical, the physical, and the mental aspect. As a Christian, I also know that there is a spiritual aspect of our lives. Okay, and certainly you have to be spiritually healthy for anything else really to matter, and that's the relationship with Lord Jesus.
Right.
From a physical, chemical, and mental aspect, we are responsible for taking care of the temple, and that's the aspect that we are charged to take care of here on this earth. We have to keep the body balanced the way God intended it to do. We are supposed to have a healthy mental outlook. Okay, you know, the Bible says that the tongue is a very powerful organ.
Right.
Okay, and we now know through research that the speech centers of our brain tend to have an overriding effect on the rest of the nervous system. Okay, so if you wake up every morning and say, man, I feel miserable, I don't have any energy, and I think I'm getting sick, well, guess what's going to happen? Over a couple of, a period of time of waking up every morning and saying, I feel miserable, I'm tired, I'm getting sick, well, then guess what's going to happen? You're going to start feeling miserable, getting tired, and feeling sick.
Right.
Okay, they've classified this in the scientific world as the psychoneuroendoimmunology. Okay, the psychoneuroendoimmunology. Okay, and basically we know that your mental outlook, your mental activity will influence the way your neurological, endocrinological, and immunological systems work. A good example of that is you can take two individuals, one that just loves roller coasters. I mean, he'd ride a roller coaster all day long. There's not much more happy in life. Okay, and then the other spectrum is that guy who just dreads roller coaster, won't get on it for anything.
Right.
Well, if you took those two individuals and you put them in a car and you drove them to a Six Flags parking lot, and before you took the trip, you measured their blood, and you found out what their blood levels were, their gases, their endorphin levels, those sorts of things. You'd get a baseline reading. You took them to the Six Flags parking lot, and you got out of the car and you pointed at the roller coaster and you said, "You're going to ride that roller coaster," and then checked those two people's blood. You'd find changes in their blood from the baseline you took before you took the car ride.
The one that's excited?
The ones that excited, boy, he'd have an increased oxygen level in his blood. He'd have an increased endorphin level. Boy, he'd just be charged up and ready to go. And meanwhile, the gentleman who is dreading the ride, okay, you'd find an increase in all the stress responses, an increase in cortisol, an increase of white blood cell production. Okay, so there would be a real measurable physical difference from an attitude.
Well, the Bible says, a merry heart doeth good like a medicine.
Right.
Sometimes you can't affect your surroundings always, but you can affect how you respond to those surroundings.
Affect I'm not talking about speaking yourself well necessarily.
Right.
Okay, but the attitude of first of all, thankfulness. One, that we've got a breath. I mean, you wake up in the morning and you've got a breath. You should be thankful.
Right.
That is a gift of God.
Sure.
Because it's not going to happen. It's not going to. He is sustaining His entire universe. If it is alive, He is sustaining its life. And if it is in a non-living state, He is the one that is sustaining that non-living state. So we have to keep the proper mental attitude. Another area of our body that we have to keep balanced, and that's the chemical aspect of our life. Okay, we are made up of atoms and molecules. Atoms and molecules are the building blocks, the Legos or the tinker toys, depending on the generation you come from. Okay, that God used to make His creation. Okay, and basically He used the same building blocks to make everything.
Right.
He just arranged them in a little bit different order, okay, and gave them a little bit different functions. But the molecules themselves, they have no awareness. I've said that molecules are stupid.
Right.
They never contemplate the results or the consequences of their actions. When you take in a substance, I don't care if it's a naturally occurring or a synthetically produced substance, when you take it in, that molecule and atom is simply looking for a place to react and to bond. It doesn't care if it's the right place, the wrong place, beneficial or detrimental to the organism. Okay, molecules have to be controlled and coordinated.
Right.
Okay, and that's what God does for us. Okay, through His power in a living state. Okay, molecules in non-living states, okay, are directed by the laws of thermodynamics, the laws that govern the universe. I know you talk a lot about.
It's all falling apart.
Right, it's all falling apart. It's moving to randomness and chaos. Okay, it takes intelligence. Okay, it takes a controlling and coordinating power in order to maintain those molecules and atoms in an organized fashion. When you remove that source of organization or power, then everything falls down. One way I like to illustrate that is that one moment we are alive, and the next moment we're dead. but we have the very same molecules.
Right.
As a matter of fact, our molecules keep on doing. They keep on doing what they are known to do.
Only now it's
Only
destructive.
now it's destructive. It's chaos and it's random. And that's why the tissues break down and we decay. Okay, so, life is not about the molecules. And that's where the bumblebee part of my lecture comes in.
Oh, okay, sure.
Okay, I'll tell you about the
Got the
bumblebee.
polar bear.
Okay, we got the polar bear. You see, there are different types of science logics. Okay, two dominant ones is first off mechanism. Okay, that is what most of today's science is based on. And mechanism in a nutshell says that if you take the biggest thing and you break it down into the little bittiest pieces, well then that will explain how the big thing works.
Well, that's fatally flawed.
Well, yeah, it is flawed. Okay. But, we have spent a lot of time looking for the secret to our life and to our existence in the molecules.
Sure.
Okay. But molecules have no intelligence. Okay. You cannot find the secret to life or the secret to the universe in the lowly atom.
Well, I don't want to interrupt your train of thought,
That's
but
okay.
an example. The airplane is made up of thousands of parts which cannot fly.
With thousands of parts which cannot fly.
You cannot study the parts and figure out how the airplane flies.
Exactly. And you cannot study the parts, the atoms and the molecules of the human body and understand life.
Right, very good, okay.
Okay. Now there is another type of logic. It's called vitalism. Okay, and vitalistic logic accepts the presence of a universal intelligence or an innate intelligence or a life force or an energy source. Now these, once again, that's the atheistic, that's the world's definition. I know it's
Right.
God, you know it's God.
Right.
Okay, but they accept the presence of a universal intelligence or an innate intelligence that is controlling and directing the activities of the atoms and the molecules.
Right.
Okay. Well, mechanistic science, to show the flaws of mechanistic science has proven that bumblebees can't fly.
The wings aren't big enough.
Wings aren't
body's
big
too
enough
heavy.
and body's too heavy. Okay.
Right.
Problem is they forgot to tell the bumblebee.
So they fly just fine.
They fly. I've run from them. They fly very good.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, faster than I can run.
Right.
Okay, so bumblebees disprove, if you will, mechanistic science as an explanation for life.
Sure.
Okay, there has to be a controlling force, a universal force, a life force, a God. Okay.
Well, I get atheists all the time that tell me, well, yeah, because I'll say the universe, everything's winding down, falling apart, second law of thermodynamics.
Right.
And they'll say, well, that's only in a closed system. If you add energy, it reverses entropy. And they say, see, the sun shines on the earth, that supplies energy, so that's how the earth is able to overcome the second law of thermodynamics. What they're not realizing is the sunlight energy is destructive unless there's something to organize it, like plants.
Plants, exactly.
Otherwise, it's destructive on everything else.
Right. There is, those radiations, those ion particles, okay, that bombard us. That's like shooting marbles into a marble game.
Right.
Okay. I mean, you throw something in there, it's going to scatter what's in there,
right.
not control and coordinate and organize what's in there. I use the analogy. I have Legos that I take around for talks that
Right.
explain the molecules and the atoms and how they interact. And I was joking with my wife that I had to tape the lid down, okay, because if the lid popped open
On your Lego container.
on the Lego container, if the lid popped open on my drive down here, those Legos would scatter.
They wouldn't organize.
They wouldn't organize themselves into anything. They just randomly fall through the car.
Well, and that's a pretty good analogy because the Lego is designed to snap into another Lego.
Just like the
So-
atoms are designed to fit together.
Right.
Okay.
But random shaking of these Legos is not going to produce the desired result.
No.
No.
Not at all. Randomness is not an efficient means to build anything.
Every time I've done lots of handyman work, remodeling, construction type stuff, and I marvel how anybody can believe in evolution because nothing gets better by itself.
One of the biggest stumbling blocks for evolution and mechanistic science is the process of morphogenesis. And so that's a stumbling block that you can always stump them.
Right.
How can you explain morphogenesis? Okay, morphogenesis is the construction of life in a living organism
Right.
out of nothing. Okay, and the best analogy I can find for it is a vacant lot. Imagine if you could a vacant lot, okay, and then suddenly nobody put them there, just kind of magically pieces of a house. The lumber, the nails, the shingles, the plumbing, the wiring, all the pieces appeared on the lot. Okay, in a big old heap of pow. Okay, first off, that would take I mean, that's a miracle in itself. I can't even imagine the number of billions of years, okay, that would be necessary for all these pieces to fall into place.
Sure.
Especially with nobody doing it.
Right.
And on the big scale, it's a lot like if you were flying in an airplane, okay, over the United States, and you had a 2x4 in your hand, and you threw it out the window, and it landed on that lot. Okay, I mean, that's just the randomness and the haphazard nature at which all these things had to get in the same place in the first time. Okay? But anyway, so miraculously, all the pieces at least show up in the right place.
Okay.
Okay? That's a stretch in and of itself.
Sure.
But then, all the pieces start to properly line themselves up. And 2x4A lines up with 2x4B.
And the nails.
And the nails come along and drive themselves in.
Right.
And everything that was in between A and B got out of the way.
Sure.
Okay, and the right nail and the right length found the right spot and held them together.
Of course, there's zero chance of that.
It's an absolute zero chance.
Yeah.
And then one board after another following that process, and then the screws and the wiring and the plumbing and all the things that go into building a house just accidentally, on their own, lining themselves up and building a house. Okay, that's what morphogenesis is. Okay, and I mean, once again, I don't know how many billions of years.
It would never happen.
But it just couldn't happen.
See, in their mind, they somehow think, well, if you give it enough time, it might happen. So wait a minute, time's not going to help.
No, if you leave that pile of building material on that vacant lot for an extended period of time, it's not going to build a house.
They'll rot.
It's going to rot. It's going to turn back into the dirt that it came from.
Okay, so here we have the human body, and people are concerned about their health. How do I be healthy? Step one is you need to understand how God originally designed it.
Yeah.
And then find out, are we following His plan? Are we obeying His orders, doing what He said? If we're not, fix that.
Right.
Because I think an awful lot of people have diseases, a lot of Christians get diseases or various problems, and they pray and say, God, help me. God, please fix this. They don't realize God's already given us the commands in the Scriptures to tell us, and we're just simply not obeying.
Right. Yeah. Part of that is the schemes of Satan. He's blinded us to them.
Right.
He's taken the knowledge we have of atoms and molecules, and he's perverted it into the principles and the theories of evolution.
Right.
Okay, I mean, the Lord revealed, all knowledge that we have is revealed to us from God. He is the source of all intelligence in the universe. What we know because He's given us and revealed it to us. Okay? Faith, I've come up with some definitions to kind of explain this. Faith is believing in things not yet proven, that you know to be true.
Okay.
Okay? Knowledge is information gained to support truth.
And knowledge base builds.
Knowledge builds. Science is a means by gathering knowledge. Okay? Logic is the interpretation of the knowledge to draw conclusions.
Okay.
Okay? Well, we're in the process of, the Lord's revealed lots of knowledge to us. Okay? We have scientific procedures that allow us to verify things as truth.
Sure.
Okay? But at the end of all that scientific knowledge, there's always an amount of faith, okay, that we have to tack on the end of it.
Right.
Okay? I can't, as you've said yourself, we can't scientifically prove, okay, creation, because we weren't there and we can't repeat it.
Right. Not observable.
It's not observable. It's the same thing for evolution.
Sure.
Okay? Now we can look at lots of things now and draw conclusions from them. Okay? And, anybody that objectively weighs the evidence will conclude that evolution is a farce. It just can't happen. Okay? So that, the evolution thing is just Satan perverting our perception of the knowledge that's been revealed to us. Okay? We have to understand why God made us. We have to understand how He made us and how His creation works. Once we understand how His creation is working, okay, then we can do the things that are necessary to help maintain and take care of it. Okay? It's just like you wouldn't know how to take care of your car or your computer if you didn't read the manual.
Sure.
Okay? Well, first off, we have a manual. It's called the Bible.
Right.
Okay? And there's lots of good, solid scientific information in the Bible about our body and how it works. We have to keep the body balanced. Okay, we talked about the mental aspect, the chemical aspect, and then there's a third portion, and that's the body. Okay, the physical existence.
Okay, take a few minutes and just, if you had to break the body into a few basic systems, explain what do we have, how does it work?
Okay, Well, the first system I'd have to start with is the nervous system.
Okay.
Okay. The nervous system, as I said, is responsible for controlling and coordinating all the structures and all the functions of the human body, either directly or indirectly.
Okay.
Okay?
We've all got a head.
We've all got a head. Weighs 13 to 15 pounds, the average adult head.
The brain weighs 3 to 5 pounds.
3 to 5 pounds.
Okay. That brain controls everything,
Yes.
but it has to get the message to the body,
Yes.
which comes through the spinal column.
It comes through the spinal cord. 97% of the nerves that control our body come out in between the bones of the spine. They exit the skull, okay, and travel down through the spinal cord, exiting through the spinal, in between the spinal vertebrae.
Okay.
Okay.
So God designed the body with the central head, just like Christ is the head of the church.
Christ is the head of the church.
And we're all supposed to be lined up with him.
That's right.
And sometimes we get out of line
Yes, we do.
and problems come in.
Yes. You know, anytime you lose the alignment, okay, when you're improperly tapped into the source, okay, spiritually with Christ
Right.
as the head of the church, also as the head of the body. Everything starts in the head. It comes down from the head, down through the body, out to the parts, causing the parts to grow according to the way Christ would have them grow. Okay? We know embryologically in the developing baby, okay, if we sever a nerve, whatever that nerve was controlling will not develop.
So you could cut the nerve to the lung?
And the lungs would never form.
Okay.
Okay? Everybody knows in an adult that if you sustain a spinal trauma and you sever the spinal cord in the lower back, okay, you lose function of the legs.
Right.
And over time, the legs atrophy.
Sure.
Okay, because they have no neurological source directing their activity. Okay? Our body makes about 50,000 new cells every 10 minutes.
Okay.
Okay? Traveling in our brainstem are 100 million nerve impulses per second. Okay? Information coming from the body up to the brain interpreting that information, and then sending a response back down. Okay?
Doesn't it also filter out, decide what's important?
Oh, absolutely. It's got an amazing filtering system. Okay, technically our nervous system is so fine-tuned that it is perceiving the fly that's bouncing off the window in the front of the building. Okay, it's picking up that sound wave, okay, bringing it in, but it's throwing it out as unnecessary information.
Right.
Okay, don't bother me with that right now.
I'm right now, I was not thinking about my right foot, but if I stopped and thought about it, I could tell you without looking what position it's in, you know, what pressure points it has.
Exactly. Constant communication. All the bodily parts, all the body parts, okay, are constantly feeding information up into the brain, telling the brain where the body's at.
Right.
Just a simple little process of coming up and scratching our nose.
Sure.
Okay, very complex neurological process.
Oh, get a robot to do that. It's incredible.
It's incredible. Okay, it starts with the conscious thing, I want to scratch my nose.
Right.
Okay, and I start moving my finger toward the nose. But as I'm moving my arm, okay, I've got nerve endings in the joints and the muscles of my arms firing information back into my brain, telling my brain how I'm doing. Okay, and it starts making corrections. Otherwise, I end up with the finger in the eye.
Which is coordination.
It's a coordination process. Okay, so you know we have different parts of the brain responsible for different parts of the job. Okay, the Bible says that every part has a job.
Sure.
Okay, and you can't make another part do a different part's job.
The eye can't do the job of the ear.
The eye can't do the job of the ear. Okay, so the nervous system by far is the primary system of importance in the human body. As a matter of fact, all the other systems we have are actually supportive to the nervous system. Our nervous system will shut down all the other parts and deprive them of anything they need in order to preserve itself.
Okay.
Okay, you see, it's our nervous system that gives us our identity. It is our nervous system that makes us consciously aware of our Creator. Okay, I mean, it is the primary purpose. Okay, the musculoskeletal system, which comprises 60% of our body, that's the muscles and the bones.
Right.
Okay, body mass is equivalent to about 60%. Okay, this primary function of the musculoskeletal system is first to provide protection to the nervous system. Okay, and then to provide mobility to the nervous system. You see, if you were just a nervous system and the rock was falling off the cliff,
You couldn't move.
you couldn't move to get out of the way. Okay, so the Lord gave us a musculoskeletal system to get us out of the way of the falling rock.
And everything else feeds information to this system.
Everything-
The eyes tell us what we're looking at, the ears what we're hearing.
Right.
Feeling.
Yeah, exactly. Matter of fact, our brain, we have centers in our brain that directly tie our eyes to our neck. That's the only function of that piece of brain. And it's designed to get us out of the way of the baseball
Jerking the ball.
without thinking.
Sure.
Okay, that's occurring without conscious awareness. Now, as I'm happening it, and the ball's already past me, I'm going, phew, that was close.
Right.
Okay, but that was a neurological reflex that took place simply from the eyes to this one brain center, okay, and then right down to the muscles of the neck to make us do that. We have a similar system for auditory response. Okay, we hear a loud bang, we're doing that. Okay, and
Or you step on a nail.
Or you step on a nail.
Your leg jerks.
Leg jerks. Okay, those occur at spinal cord levels, but at the same time, they're also sending information back up to the brain, okay, so that the brain is constantly aware where that foot is.
Mm-hmm.
I've used when I taught anatomy and physiology, I used the example of putting your hand on a hot plate.
Right.
Okay, you put your hand on a hot plate, and you're going to reflex right back off.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that part of the reflex is actually simply spinal cord. Okay, it goes into the spinal cord and right back out. Now, as it goes in, and as it's sending one message back out to pull the arm off, it's also sending a message up to the head saying, I'm pulling my arm off. That was hot. Dummy, don't do it again.
Right.
Okay. And at the same time, it's sending a message to our cerebellum so that when I jerk that hand back, I don't end up slapping myself in the head, causing another injury. Okay, because that's just a reflex.
Okay.
Okay, so that neurological center, our brain, is controlling the memory of it's hot. Okay,
Right.
Don't do that again, dummy.
Right.
Okay, and it's also saying, hey, on your way back, don't hit yourself in the head.
All like that.
All on nanoseconds.
Okay, so you got 206 bones in the human adult body.
206 bones in the human adult body and over 600 muscles in the human adult body. And they are all interconnected. Okay?
It's quite a wiring system.
Yeah, it's quite a wiring system. Okay? They are interconnected neurologically. Okay, through the mechanisms I've just kind of talked about
Right.
briefly, but they're also interconnected biomechanically. Okay, we're a giant system of levers and pulleys. And anytime you move one set of muscles and joints, you're causing a series of biomechanical chain reactions that's influencing the muscular tension and the joint position throughout the rest of the system. Okay,
Okay.
That's the balancing and the antagonistic kind of responses. Okay, to our actions. Okay.
And just that system can be studied for a lifetime. But just to give people a general perspective here, you got 206 bones, 600 or so muscles,
Mm-hmm.
all connected. Now, those bones and muscles and nerves, etc., they need something to function. They need proper fuel. They need,
Absolutely.
which is what the whole nutrition and health
Yeah.
is all about. That's the other part of your sermon,
But-
about polar bear, bumblebee, and
healthcare.
Healthcare.
And healthcare.
how do you take care of this body? I got this complex body. I was born. I didn't know anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
Everything I know about it now I've learned, and there's probably a lot more to learn.
Mm-hmm.
If you had to explain to somebody, what basic principles do you do as far as taking care of your body?
Well, keeping in mind that our objective is keeping the body balanced the way God intended it.
Right.
Okay. Man was not meant to mend his body. He was meant to take care of it. Health and healing comes from above.
Okay.
Okay. And more times than not, what we need to do is instead of intervening, trying to make his creation better, trying to correct his mistakes. Okay, our Creator didn't make mistakes.
Right.
It was a perfect creation, a perfect body. Okay, and what we have wrong with it now is a result of this world's perversion of that body, and not his creation mistakes.
Okay.
Most of our health care is geared towards making it better. Okay, well, you got this symptom, let's give you a drug that will make the opposite happen. Okay, if you've got a part that's not working right, let's just take the part out. Okay, we've got machines that will do that job for you, or heck, it's an extra part, you don't need it anyhow.
Right.
Okay.
Back to evolutionary philosophy.
Back to the evolutionary philosophies again. What we are supposed to do is keep the body balanced the way God intended it. We are supposed to take care of the musculoskeletal system. It is 60% of our body. Okay. Roger Sperry, a very intelligent individual, won a Nobel Prize back in the early 90s for his work in brain research. He is a neurophysiologist.
Okay.
Okay. Dr. Sperry said a couple of very interesting things. He said, first off, that 90% of our neurological mental activity, okay, is actually geared towards maintaining the musculoskeletal system. Okay, so 90% of the activity our brain goes through, okay, it's doing so in order to keep the bones, the muscles, and the joints in their proper interrelationship.
Automatically moving when you get uncomfortable.
Automatically moving when you get uncomfortable, contracting muscles for respiratory purposes.
Heart beating.
Heart beating, all those sorts of, well, not so much heart beating, that falls into cardiovascular.
Okay.
But musculoskeletal maintenance, okay, is what 90% of our activity is taking place as far as neurological is concerned. So if you Dr. Sperry also said that as a person's body distorts, it has less energy available for metabolism, healing, and thinking. Okay?
Because the first thing it's going to do is...
It's going to shift its concentration and its effort into maintaining that musculoskeletal system. If we were, if you've got a brand new automobile,
right,
with a brand new, perfect front end alignment, okay, you can drive down that road using a little finger.
Right.
Okay, because it doesn't take much energy, much effort to maintain.
Because it's working right.
Because it's working right.
Okay.
If you get a bad alignment, if you hit a few potholes over the years, okay, and those tires, the camber on those tires starts to change, and now you've got a bad alignment. Well, now you've got to use both hands on the steering wheel because you have to fight, okay, the distortion and the dysfunction, okay, that is taking place in those wheels. Okay?
So your driving energy is not being directed to...
towards going forward, it's being directed towards just keeping the car on the road.
So your body's energy can be directed to things that it shouldn't have to be directed toward.
Exactly. As our body becomes distorted, okay, once again, remembering that all of our systems are geared towards preservation of the nervous system.
Okay.
Okay. We are 60% musculoskeletal. Okay. Without our musculoskeletal system, our nervous system is vulnerable to all the forces of gravity, okay, and all the other things that can happen in this world. Okay, so as that body distorts, your brain shifts more and more neurological activity, okay, to the care and the maintenance and just trying to get that musculoskeletal system to do its job.
So are you saying if a person is tired a lot,
there's very probable structural distortions that's causing that body to work overtime.
So the energy's going the wrong place.
Energy's going the wrong place. It's an improper energy conversion.
Or if a person is just simply not alert mentally.
If the person is not mentally alert, less energy for metabolism, running the parts,
right,
and less metabolism for healing, repairing the parts,
right,
okay, and less metabolism for thinking, i.e., contemplating the parts.
Right.
Okay, you know, it talks about, you know, science has said for years that we're only utilizing a very small percentage of our brain power.
I had students that used very
little. Yeah, I know. I taught a little college myself. It's amazing how much little brain power they can use.
Yes, sir.
But when they make statements like that, they're talking about our conscious brain power.
Okay.
They aren't talking about our brainstem levels, our basic biological functions. People don't damage brainstems and be normal.
Right.
Okay. When you damage those lower those more basic neurological centers, okay, you are going to have some sort of long-term ramifications in the system. You know, we're not talking about the part you think with. We're talking about the part that you exist. That makes you...
you're not thinking about.
The part you're not thinking about.
So you got this spine coming out of the brain.
Yes.
Going through, the nerve is going through the vertebrae.
The spinal cord comes out through the foramen magnum, at the base of the skull, and then it goes through a series of 26 vertebrae, okay, from the base of our skull all the way down to our tailbone.
Right.
And then coming out in between those vertebrae, these vertebrae sit on top of one another. I have just a few of them here.
Like a stack of donuts,
Like a stack of donuts stacked on top of one another. And when they do so, in between each bone, they form a little canal. It's called the intervertebral foramen. And coming out of one side, in between two bones, is approximately 300,000 nerves. So coming out in between, on one side would be 300,000 nerves, and on the other side would be another 300,000 nerves.
So this is your wiring harness.
This is your wiring. This is the communication cables.
Right.
Okay, between the body parts and the command center. Okay, it takes place from the base of the skull all the way down to your tailbone, about 31 pairs.
Okay, now a fiber optic cable can handle an enormous amount of information. I know they say if you cut a fiber optic cable and you're digging in your yard, they're going to charge you $10,000 a minute or something like that to come fix it.
Right, exactly.
Because there's a lot of stuff going through there. Is a nerve more complex than a fiber optic cable as far as is it carrying more information? Or any analogy there? Would you?
Well, yeah, certainly I believe it's more complex.
Sure.
Okay, without a doubt, because we are talking about dumb, mindless molecules carrying on very complex physiological activities.
Right.
Okay. Our nerves are very specialized. Okay, we have a nerve receptor. Okay, if you take a patch of skin, you'll have literally a dozen different types of nerve endings.
Some for pressure, some for pain.
Some for light pressure, some for heavy pressure.
Some for temperature.
One for hot, one for cold.
Ah.
Different nerves.
One for pleasure.
One for pleasure. I mean, there are slow firing neurons. There are pain neurons called nociceptors. Like I say, there's a different nerve ending for a cold sensation and a different nerve ending for a hot sensation. Okay, there are what's sense organs that are detecting, hair stimulation.
Sure.
Okay, light pressure, heavy pressure, and then you start getting into proprioceptive organs, sense organs that are in the individual muscle fibers. Okay, telling the brain what muscle fibers are doing. Okay, then you have sensor organs that are in the joints. Okay, in the tendons around the joints, telling the body where the body position is at in relative to that joint. So, we are a very complex network of nerves. Okay, matter of fact, if we were to dissolve all the other tissues, we'd still have a complete outline of the entire structure in the nervous tissue.
Right.
In the nervous tissue.
Okay, so somebody has a problem. They say, I've got a headache.
Mm-hmm.
They take an aspirin.
Yes.
Okay. What they're doing is unplugging the nerves.
They've pulled the plug.
They unplug the idiot light.
They unplug the idiot light. The aspirin has. You see, allopathic medicine, by definition, and most of medicine is allopathic in nature. And what allopathic medicine means, it's a drug that's designed to cause an opposite effect in the body.
So the body's telling you, I got a headache.
And so this thing is just simply going to produce a chemical reaction that's going to mimic the opposite effect.
So then you think, I'm fine.
I'm fine. I don't have a headache.
Meanwhile, you didn't fix the problem.
Didn't fix the problem. Meanwhile, the aspirin wears off, and then you take another one.
Okay, suppose somebody does that for 40 years. That's the way they live. I'm sick, take a drug.
Right.
I'm sick, take a drug.
Right.
Which is what we've all been taught.
That's exactly what we've been taught.
Then, when they turn 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, they're still alive, they keep them alive, but their value or quality of life is
Absolutely deteriorating. Okay.
You telling me about a guy that fell off his bike that you treated? He was how old?
84-year-old.
84-year-old?
84-year-old gentleman out in California, retired minister.
Okay.
And he was riding his bike on a Sunday afternoon in a closed shopping mall. They were closed on Sunday afternoon. And he was riding his bike in and around the pillars, okay, of the awning. And he hit a patch of gravel and wiped out. Okay, landed on his shoulder, and that's how he ended up in my office. But here is an 84-year-old gentleman who's in my office because he wiped out while riding his 10-speed. Okay, I've got 30-year-old patients who I can't get off the couch.
Yes.
Okay, I mean, the difference between an old car that's a classic and an old car that's a rusted piece of heap in a junkyard is how the owner took care of it along the way. I've used the analogy that our bodies are like a brand new Lexus. Okay, it's a fine automobile.
Okay.
Okay, there are two ways you can destroy that vehicle. You can take that vehicle and you can drive it off the cliff and blow it up.
Sure.
Okay, and you've gone from a fine automobile to garbage all at once. Very few of us go that way. Okay, but we can go that way.
Right, some do.
You can catastrophic injuries that cause us to die.
Right.
Most of us destroy our Lexus not by driving it off the cliff, but by driving it to the Walmart. Okay, and we drive it to the Walmart, and the guy next to us gets out and opens his car door and puts a little dent in our fine Lexus. Okay, now we come out of the store and we see that little dent in our Lexus. Okay, we're going to come undone. Okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to take that Lexus to the body shop. And we're going to say, fix it. I don't care what it costs. Fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because this guy opened his car door into my door, and he put a dent in it, and he chipped the paint. And if I don't fix it, I know that's going to cause me problems down the road. Now, it won't necessarily change the way the car drives, okay, but it will change the way it looks.
And expose an area and the rust will get in.
Right, exactly. You compromise the integrity of those molecules, okay, the environmental influences get in, and that metal starts to break down. We call it rust.
Sure.
Okay, you know what you call rust in the human body? Arthritis.
Okay.
Okay, same basic principle. It's exposing the molecules to an unnatural or an inappropriate stress, and they start deteriorating and break down.
Suppose somebody has arthritis.
Mm-hmm.
This probably indicates a lifetime of not doing what?
Absolutely. Of not taking care of, not removing the little dents.
Okay.
You see, you put a dent in the car, you don't notice the dent. It doesn't change the way the car drives right away. But if every week you drove to the Walmart and somebody else put another dent in the car, at the end of the year, you got 52 dents in that car.
Right.
Okay, and the first dent's starting to decay a little bit.
Yes.
Okay. You did that for a second year, now you have 104 dents in your car. Okay, now I don't know when, but sometime or another, all those dents are going to start influencing the way the car actually operates. Okay, it's going to start messing up its aerodynamics, the wind's going to start catching it, it's going to be harder to drive and manage the car. It's going to require more energy, okay, to keep the car going.
Okay.
Okay, well, we do that to our body. We get, traumas when we're young. we get traumas as we grow, and we get traumas as we get older, okay, but we never go in and take care of the traumas, or at least very rarely go in and take care of the traumas. We only take care of the traumas when it's a major crash. Okay, we don't take care of the little bitty dents. And it's the accumulation of little bitty dents that causes the car to deteriorate.
Which, the other day you said something about, they did a study on babies that were born, and during the birth process, like 80% of them?
Yeah, birth traumas are very common. Okay, first off, the way we give birth right now, okay, is
laying flat down on your back.
Laying on the back in the recumbent position. That process was started by Henry VIII.
Okay.
Okay, who had no concern about the health and well-being of the mother or the child.
Right.
Okay, he just wanted quick identification so he could decide what he was going to do.
Yeah.
Okay, but you know, giving birth laying on your back is very traumatic, not only on mother but also on baby. A whole lot more force, a whole lot more pushing has to be done in order to get that baby out of the birth canal. Those things are slippery and slimy for a reason. Okay,
yeah.
if we were in a stand-up or squatted position, okay, gravity would help those babies come out without so much force.
And most women in other countries use a birthing stool of some kind.
Use a birthing stool,
sitting.
Or they're sitting or squatting.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So birth traumas. Okay, you mentioned the European study. It was done by a researcher by the name of Gutmann and his associate Fryman. Okay, and basically they evaluated 2,000 infants between the ages of 0 and 5 days old, newborns to 5-day-old. And what they found is that 80% of those children were already showing signs of autonomic nervous system imbalance. Okay, now the autonomic nervous system is our sympathetic and our parasympathetic nerves. Okay, sympathetic nerves speed things up as a general rule. Fight, flight, get us out of the way of the falling right. Heart beats faster, lungs increase, blood flow to our muscles increase. Okay, sympathetic nerves also tend to shut down the digestive tract. Okay, you don't care about digesting your White Castle, okay, when you're getting out of the way of the falling rock.
Right.
Okay, the parasympathetics have basically the opposite effect. They increase blood flow to the digestive tract, and they diminish blood flow to the heart and to the lungs and slow down their activities. Okay, well, what Gutmann was able to demonstrate is that 80% of the infants between the ages of 0 and 5-day-old were already showing signs of an imbalance in those two systems. It would manifest itself in the forms of poor feeding patterns, ear infections, colic, general failure to thrive, okay, temperature regulation problems, okay, all those sorts of manifestations. Found that the majority of those autonomic nervous system imbalances was a result of a distortion at the base of the skull in the atlas vertebra, the top vertebra right underneath the neck.
So during birth,
during the birthing process, and I've seen dozens of training films on
delivering babies.
Delivering babies.
Yeah.
And in normal text, okay, on a training film, they showed one doctor taking a baby's head and rotating it nearly 180 degrees, okay, as he tried to help that baby go through restitutions on the way out of the canal. What happens during the birthing process is the head and the body have to go through a series of corkscrew procedures, okay, in order to turn around and come down and out.
Right.
Okay, and unfortunately, our OB doctors tend to get a little bit anxious, okay, wanting to speed the process up.
It's money.
It's money.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can do 5 instead of 3 in a day.
Exactly. And so once that baby's head's out, okay, they don't want to wait for restitution. So what they tend to do is they tend to rotate that head real far to one side, okay, so that they can pop out the upper shoulder. Okay, and then they'll rotate the head real far the other way and pull up so they can pop out the bottom shoulder, and then the baby will come on out. Now, the baby has the ability to do that on its own if we just kind of back off and let it.
Right.
Okay, but no, we want to get it out as rapidly as we can. Okay, so like taking this young infant spine, okay, that has no experience in weight bearing whatsoever except for a little bit of in uterine, but it's floating in water there.
Sure.
Okay, and so you've got these young immature joints, okay, with this oversized head sitting on top of these undersized vertebra, okay, and you're taking it through extensive range of motion, okay, and it's getting stuck there. Okay, and so they pull it out, and you know, this vertebra is twisted off to one side or the other, and it starts interfering not only with the nerve roots right there, but also interfering with the brainstem itself. Okay, a lot of sudden infant death syndrome, crib death, okay, is linked to upper cervical spine trauma. Okay, another major factor involved with that, and we'll talk about it in another lecture, is the vaccination issues which are associated with sudden infant death syndrome. But physically, the trauma of birth is very difficult on the baby. Okay, that's when it gets its first. If it's sitting in the uterus properly, then it's getting its first trauma at the birth process.
Okay.
Now, just for the record, if the mother spine is distorted, particularly the pelvis and the sacrum, if it's distorted during her pregnancy, that causes a torsioning and a distortion to take place in the uterus. Okay, and we end up with what's called in-uterine constraint. Okay, where the baby is unable to turn around and move in an appropriate manner inside the uterus. Okay, and by the 7th month, the baby is supposed to be in a vertex position, head down.
Right.
Okay, if it cannot flip over because the uterus is torted, okay, well then it ends up crammed into the uterus with its head being pushed down if it's in a true breech position.
Sure.
Okay, so we end up with babies with no necks virtually. Okay,
Right.
because everything's compressed down. If it's in a transverse line, okay, either a brow or breech or brow or facial presentation where it's laying crosswise in the uterus, well then we end up with a baby with an extensive hyperextension injury. Okay, and that can cause problems. As a matter of fact, we know that cellular growth is 7 times greater in the in-uterine fetus as opposed to the infant. Okay,
After it's born.
after it's born.
Right.
Okay, so if you've got cellular activity taking place 7 times the normal rate of an infant, and it spends 3 months with its head compressed down like that, it's going to cause some morphogenic changes, okay, in the developing process of that spine. So that's why it's important for women during pregnancy to get their body properly taken care of.
Okay, so let me try to summarize here, and we'll take a little break.
Right.
If the woman during pregnancy takes care of her health nutritionally
and physically,
keeping it aligned,
yes, sir.
keeping the muscles toned,
Right.
and the baby is born properly without the twisting or the jerking or all those kind of things,
Right.
which a lot of that happens in hospitals.
Oh, yeah. A high percentage of them get dropped.
And dropped, yeah. Okay. Then the chances of the baby's health being good are much better.
Much better.
And in the Bible, they talk about wrapping people in swaddling clothes. My understanding is that the custom of the Middle East folks was to take the baby, pull it out straight, and wrap it up. Hold it straight.
Yeah. Yeah. You know,
That's what swaddling means.
that's what swaddling means. You know, the baby has just spent, you know, if everything's gone well, 9 months, okay, in the fetal position.
Right, right.
Okay, and you know, when you're coming out of the womb, you know, and you're exposed to gravitational forces and things along those lines, okay, if you don't properly handle that baby, okay, and that's why C-sections are so horrible, okay, because when they're doing C-sections, okay, I mean they're grabbing the first part they can get a hold of,
Pull the baby out.
and pulling the baby out, okay, and so I mean you're just dealing with, you know, early childhood distortions, okay. If you stretch that baby out, not too extensively, but if you
Right.
stretch that baby out and wrap it up and give it some time to maintain that new proper position, okay, you're going to stop a whole lot of childhood development problems,
Right.
okay, that are continuing to occur because of the distortion. Volkmann-Wolff law, laws in physical medicine, says that tissues grow according to the stress that's placed upon it.
Well, the bodybuilder that builds his muscles also builds bigger bones.
It also builds bigger bones.
Slower,
Slower. But if you have a shift in weight bearing, if you are carrying more weight on one side of your body compared to the other side of the body because of a distortion or a trauma or something along those lines, well then those bones will actually begin to model themselves and you'll end up with wedged vertebra or vertebrae that are thinner on one side compared to the other side. Okay?
And then it can become real permanent.
And then it becomes a permanent process.
Oh,
Okay.
great. Let's take a break and we'll come back and talk about vaccinations, how they tie in.
Okay.
Thank you.
The top 4 leading causes of death in the United States are all self-induced problems as a general rule. When you look at the top 4 leading causes of death, the first is heart disease. And there's a lot to be done in our lifestyles and the way we live and care for ourselves that's going to influence heart disease. The second leading cause of death in the United States is cancer. And certainly there are, you know, hundreds of things we expose ourselves and do to ourselves on a day in and day out basis that we know causes the formation of cancer. There's so much that we could do to prevent so many of the cancers we have to deal with. The third leading cause of death is lung disease. Okay, well, you don't have to go far to find man's involvement with that. I mean, you know, you talked about cigarettes are the smoking, are the ones that smoke, and the people who smoke are the suckers, and that's really the way it is. You know, we're just putting toxic, noxious substances into our body, and we're going to pay the price for it. And then the fourth leading cause of death, and this is one that usually surprises people, the fourth leading cause of death in the United States today is correctly prescribed drugs. Okay,
Wow.
the correctly prescribed drug. This is from the April 15th issue of the Journal of the American Medical Association, April 15th, 1998. So this is a new study. And depending on the year, somewhere between 100 to 200,000 people die every year from prescription drugs. Over the last 10 years, the average has been 100,000 people. And these are from the correctly prescribed drugs. Leads me to a couple of questions. First off, what's your definition of correct?
Sure.
Okay, I mean, we're talking about, a patient presenting themselves with a symptom, the doctor prescribing a drug that is normally prescribed for that symptom,
Okay.
the prescribing it in the right dosage, and then the patient taking it in the proper manner, and it results in death. In 1997, there was 106,000 deaths. In 1996, there were 198,000 deaths from correctly prescribed drugs. Every year, it puts over 2 million people in the hospital with serious illnesses. Okay, so and those numbers do not include the incorrectly prescribed or the incorrectly taken, and it does not include drug interactions.
Wow.
Okay, so so the fourth leading cause of death is simply the result of man trying to change his symptoms. Trying to alter the way he feels as opposed to taking care of what's not working right.
Unplug the idiot light.
They're unplugging the idiot light.
Yep.
Meanwhile, they're driving another mile down the road and the car's throwing a rod and the engine blows up. Along the lines of the prescription drugs issues, and as far as what we do to deteriorate our health, and that brings up the issues of vaccinations.
Oh, tragic.
It is a fallacy of science. We have been duped into the immunization vaccination process.
You're right.
We give our infants their first injection when they're 1 day old, and we're injecting them for hepatitis. Now, hepatitis is a serious health problem. Mm-hmm. It is predominantly found in intravenous drug users and prostitutes.
Right.
Okay, that's some of that result of sin. Willful sin illness situation.
You're doing it to yourself.
You're doing it to yourself. Unfortunately, the pharmaceutical companies have spent literally millions of dollars developing a vaccine for hepatitis. It's not very effective. As a matter of fact, the hepatitis vaccine is the only vaccine that the incidence of disease actually went up after they came out with the vaccine. So we didn't do anything to influence the incidence except spread it.
Yeah.
We give our children their first immunization against hepatitis when they're 1 day old. The vaccine at best is good for 5 years. Okay, which means before this child is at risk, reasonable risk, okay, i.e. Intravenous drug user or multiple sex partners, okay, they're going to require 3 to 4 of these vaccinations
before they reach 20.
Before they reach 20. The vaccine contains formaldehyde, which is a known carcinogen. The vaccine contains mercury and aluminum compounds, okay, which are known toxins to the neurological system.
How does the body get rid of that?
It doesn't.
It can't.
It can't. It accumulates in the neurological tissue, okay, and interferes with its function. And as we've talked earlier, if you interfere with the function of the nervous system, you are now influencing all the other body systems that we have. The increase of aluminum and mercury in our vaccines has been linked to things such as attention deficit disorders, autism.
We give the kids Ritalin.
We give the kids Ritalin
instead of
stopping the vaccine process. There's also other issues involved when you start talking about attention deficit disorders. That leads us into the nutritional aspects of it.
Yeah.
But Ritalin is just another example of, an allopathic remedy trying to effect an opposite reaction than what the body's demonstrating.
Okay, now the average American that's going to watch this tape or listen to this type of conversation is going to say, "What? Don't vaccinate your kids."
It is one of the last sacred cows in our society. But I mean, I have 3 children. We haven't vaccinated them, and they do attend public school. By the way, that is one of the common lies, that if your children aren't vaccinated, they can't attend public school.
Right.
Okay, we can deal with that issue a little bit later. But even my own mother, I mean, for 8 years. Okay, every time we spoke, it was like, I can't believe you're not immunizing those children. What do you're playing Russian roulette with them.
How's their health?
It's excellent.
How old are they?
I have a 17-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a soon-to-be 10-year-old. And the 10-year-old was at a medical doctor's once, and that was when he was 3 months old, and that was a mistake.
Yeah.
My son had some weakness in his lungs. That was his vulnerable area. And so when he was young, he'd get sick and it'd settle into his lungs. When he was about 3 months old, he got pretty sick, had a pretty good case of bronchitis going, and Mom was getting nervous. I mean, I'm trained in this, and I've been seeing a chiropractor since I was 14 years old, so I've been having philosophical and studies in these issues for a very long time.
Right.
My wife is a little bit greener at this, and I learned a long time ago that you don't get in between mother and child.
Right.
Okay, that's just a bad place to be. That's worse than the rock and the hard place.
Right.
So I told my wife, I said, listen, if you're getting uncomfortable and you want to take the child to a pediatrician to get checked out, that's okay. You're not going to step on my toes. We'll go listen to what they say. And well, of course, they diagnosed him with bronchitis and proceeded to prescribe him amoxil, the pink stuff.
Right.
So started giving my son amoxil, and about 3 days later, he broke into this fine rash, just a red rash all over his body. Took him back to the medical doctor, and a different doctor walked in and took one look at my child and said, oh no, this baby has roseola, and proceeded to write another prescription. So we walked out of the doctor's office, and I turned to my wife and I said, she's a quack. I love that, because for 15 years now I've been called a quack. Call me a quack, so it was now my turn. But they went home and looked up drug interactions, and there was a picture of my son. I mean, he just had the red rash, just a classic penicillin rash. Woke up the next morning, and my 3-month-old son was swollen, had welts on top of welts. His little finger was as big around as my thumb. I mean, he's just swollen up like the Michelin Man. Well, we let those toxins work their way out of the body, that's what a drug is. Drug is toxic,
right,
by definition. It's a poisonous substance.
Mm-hmm.
So we let that clear out of his system a little bit, and continued to give the conservative care that we do. He gets chiropractic care. He got chiropractic care when he was 2 hours old. My children get treated once a week, regardless of how they're feeling. If there's nothing distorted, well, then I won't move it. But if there is a distortion there, then we want to catch it as soon as possible and take care of the problem.
Okay.
And what we found happening was, as he got older and older, his weak area was still his lungs. And when he first got sick, he'd be sick for 10 days to 2 weeks. And then he'd get a little bit older, and he'd get sick, catch a cold or flu, and it'd settle into his lungs, but he'd only be sick for 7 to 10 days. And then he'd get a little older, and he'd catch a cold or a flu, and it'd settle in his lungs, but he'd only be sick for 3 to 5 days. And now when he starts struggling, okay, and struggling with a cold or a virus or something along those lines, flu or something, well, it will settle into his lungs, but he throws it off in 24 to 36 hours. My son has not been on another drug since that first time.
So what do you say to a parent? Their kid's 15.
Mm-hmm.
They've already had all the vaccinations, been on drugs 15 years.
Right.
Get sick, go to the doctor, give them a drug.
Give the drug.
How do you fix it now? Have they done permanent damage?
Well, actually, my colleagues and I have spent a lot of time debating that issue. We know that when you inject noxious substance like aluminum and mercury into your system, it's there forever. It takes divine intervention to remove it.
Mm-hmm.
God can do that. It's His universe. He can do whatever He wants. But from the physical realm, okay, it stays in those tissues.
Does mercury come from teeth filling also?
Yes, and that's why a few years back, I believe it was 1990 or so, the American Dental Association went through a massive recall. Okay, and encouraged all. It was on the news and everything. If you've got mercury fillings from this time period, get into your dentist and have those fillings replaced. Okay, so a whole lot of people went in and had the mercury cavity or fillings taken out and replaced with another substance, because what was happening was just a little bit of that mercury was being leached off those fillings and finding its way into the nervous system and causing toxicity.
Wouldn't they get, just in the process of removing it though, you'd swallow more then than you would in a lifetime, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So you really...
Yeah. It's really not
a good option.
Not a good option.
Don't get it in the first place.
Right. It's funny. I know just a couple weeks ago in Kansas City, there was a medical clinic that closed down because they somehow got a mercury spill in their office. Okay, and I don't know, I imagine a sphygmomanometer or something like that busted, okay, and those things are filled with mercury.
Right.
Okay, and when you make a spill like that, some of the molecules start evaporating into the environment. So they had mercury compounds in their environment. So they closed the entire clinic down for 3 days. Okay, well, they got in there and ripped up the carpets and filtered the air and, cleaned up everything. And they concentrated on opening the second floor of the office, okay, and they got the second floor open first. And the reason they did that was so they could start giving the immunizations, okay, on schedule.
So start putting it straight into the bloodstream.
Right, exactly. We don't want you to breathe any of this mercury.
But we'll shoot it in
But
your
we're going to inject it into your blood system, okay, in the name of prevention.
Okay, from vaccinations, how many kids die from these things?
Well, we experience somewhere between 2 to 10 deaths every year from vaccinations. Immediate deaths, catastrophic in nature.
Okay.
People get the shot, children die, and there's no debate about it. It's obvious.
The vaccine
okay.
did this.
That's why we have what's called the National Childhood Injury Act. Okay, not everybody's aware of that. Our federal government has a slush fund of money set aside, okay, to pay off the parents of the children who were seriously damaged or killed from the vaccination program.
You have a phone number for that?
Not for them directly, but we do have another phone number for the National Vaccine Information Center.
Okay.
Okay, which is a good place to start if you suspect that your child has been injured. It's real hard to prove that.
Sure.
Okay, doctors stick together real tight.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, the pharmaceutical companies, they're the ones that lobbied for this bill. Pharmaceutical executives have said things, for example, with our hepatitis vaccine. The only reason we vaccinate our children for hepatitis is because children are accessible. Children cost less money to vaccinate, okay, and the high-risk groups aren't accessible. Okay, the pharmaceutical execs during the debate as to whether or not they should start immunizing children, their response was the last thing we need is an orphan vaccine. Okay, they've just spent literally millions of dollars on it, and they're going to inject it into somebody.
Could there be another factor that young mothers with young children are less knowledgeable and easily deceived?
We have been taught that the doctor is all-knowing when it comes to health. Okay, and we have been programmed to put blind faith in that doctor. As a matter of fact, I've always encouraged my patients to ask the magic question, why? When you go see any doctor, and
he says, take this drug.
He says, take this drug. Your first question should be, why? What is this drug going to do? What's the benefits of it? What's the side effects of it?
Right.
Do I have an alternative? And many times as patients have gone down that road, the doctor will simply look at them and say, take it because I said so. It's too complicated. You wouldn't understand. Mm-hmm. They've been put up on this pedestal of all-knowing health.
Right.
Okay, and we've been taught not to question them. And that's blind faith. And blind faith is dangerous.
I'm not anti-medical by any means. But
no, there is a time and a place for medical intervention.
Man, yes, and I've been many times to the doctor. But I think if you look at the results, the Hovind tribe in India, or Pakistan, Nepal, wherever they are, mm-hmm. has an average life expectancy of over 90.
Right. It used to be higher.
Used to be 150 or 60 when they were first discovered.
Exactly. When the tribe was first identified, it was up around 160.
Yeah.
And it was an amazing culture. I mean, primitive by all Western standards, but yet these people were living much longer than we ever were. And of course, the medical teams went in there and did all these evaluations and tried to figure out what was going on, and things like that. And these people were basically pictures of health.
Yep.
Okay? The only thing that they found that concerned them was that their stools tended to be a little loose, that they were prone to diarrhea.
Right.
Okay, so in our wisdom, we decided to start giving them drugs.
To help this problem.
To help, okay, this elimination problem. And as a result of our drugs, we knocked 6 decades off of their life expectancy.
And now they live to be 90.
And now they live to be 90.
Still pretty good.
Which is still real good, okay? And actually, I understand that it's actually on its way back up. You see, because now we're a couple generations out of those drug uses.
Okay.
And it's starting to the population damage that we did is starting to right itself.
And then the average age in America is someplace around 70 to 75.
Yes.
Average age of medical doctors is 58.
Yes. Yeah. And recently there's been a big push about the life expectancy coming up. Okay, that we're living longer now. Okay,
right.
But I always stress that is not a reflection of our health. I mean,
we're looking at the nursing homes.
We are sicker than we've ever been.
Yeah.
I mean, we've spent literally millions of dollars in asthma research. Okay, but yet you can drive down some highways and you see a big billboard out there saying asthma's on the rise. We need more research dollar because we're losing this fight against asthma.
Right.
Asthma is the #1 cause for parents taking pediatrics to the emergency room now. It's not trauma. More children are taken to the emergency room for asthma attacks than they are for traumas.
How many asthma patients would you guess could be fixed, if that's a proper word, cured, with chiropractic?
A high percentage of them. Asthma is one of my favorite symptoms.
Right, yeah, I knew that.
Okay, when I have especially a child coming in who's been diagnosed with what's usually referred to as neurogenic asthma. Okay, the child seems to be fine, but if they start running or they get excited or they get into a stressful environment or a polluted air environment, well then the bronchial tubes fail to dilate, okay, and the child develops asthmatic symptoms. Okay, well, bronchial tubes are lined with smooth muscle, and we've known as early as 1922 that all smooth muscle is controlled by the nervous system. Every structure, every function is controlled by the nervous system. The nerves that provide the sympathetic supply to the bronchial tubes come out of the spine in the upper portion of the back, okay, above the shoulder blades, below the neck. Okay, that is the sympathetic supply to the bronchial tubes, and the jobs of those nerves are to cause the bronchial tubes to dilate, okay, under the appropriate conditions. Okay, well, if you have a distortion, okay, in the upper portion of the spine where the neck and the upper back come together, okay, then that nerve is not able to properly function. Okay, the information is not getting from the part to the brain or from the brain out to the part, and there's a failure of those bronchial tubes to dilate. So in man's wisdom, okay, we've come up with those inhalers. The little poppers, the albuterols, the phenerols, the
Make it
Ventolin.
dilate.
Right. We can chemically, artificially cause those bronchial tubes to dilate. A couple of problems with that. One, there's certainly the use it or lose it principle. Okay, if you put your arm in a cast and don't use those muscles for an extended period of time, well then the muscles waste away and atrophy.
Sure.
Okay, if you have neurological irritation and that nerve is not firing properly, okay, and all you ever do is artificially cause those bronchial tubes to dilate, well then pretty soon your body loses the ability to dilate them on their own.
So you're stuck on that.
And so you're stuck on that.
Have you ever seen any people get off of it, though?
Oh, yes, I have. And the longer they are on it, the harder it is to get off.
Right.
Okay. I mentioned in our earlier session that our body has a constant turnover of cellular tissue. Okay. Every 10 minutes or so, we make 50,000 new cells.
Right.
Okay. If we remove the distortion, take the pressure back off that nerve, and that nerve is allowed to heal, once that nerve heals, then the tissues on the end of that nerve can also begin to heal. Okay. But you got to remove that neurological irritation for that process to take place.
So if a child comes in, mother brings her child in and says, my kid has asthma.
Mm-hmm.
You adjust his back, line up his spine.
Yes.
If he's been out for 12 years, it's going to take multiple adjustments.
Right. What we know is that when a distortion occurs, it doesn't matter if it's in your spine or any part of your body, but if there is a distortion of a joint, and that distortion stays that way for 5 to 7 days, it lays down a layer of scar tissue. Every 5 to 7 days after that, another layer of scar tissue is laid down. And it forms like an onion skin appearance. One layer of scar tissue on top of another on top of another. Every time a new layer is laid down, the old layer becomes permanent. Okay? Scar tissue is non-functional. Okay? So you basically lock in your distortions. Now we can still adjust them and correct them and put mobility into the joint, but the results of those treatments are always slower and always less than 100%.
So the longer you wait,
the more problems you have with the correction.
the less fixable.
Exactly. Another thing about the allopathic approach to asthma, and this is some studies that have come out of the New England Journal of Medicine, the Journal of the American Medical Association, the British Medical Journal, the Lancet. These are well-established, good scientific journals. And these are studies that date from 92 up through the 1998 issues. What we know is that when you do things such as, well, the whole broad classification is called the beta antagonist drugs, okay? The poppers, the albuterols, the Ventolins, the Phenylen, and those sorts of things, the little inhalers.
Right.
If you use those inhalers, you increase your likelihood of death from asthma, and you weaken the bronchial protective mechanism, and it causes your asthma to get worse.
So counterproductive.
It's counterproductive. But that's the only treatment they have. Once again, it's a case of pulling the plug to the red light. You see,
Well,
when they
yeah.
went in with asthma, all they did was they looked and they said, oh, this child is not breathing good.
Let's fix it.
So let's fix the breathing. Okay, and so they came up
Yep.
with a drug that causes the breathing to change, but it still has a problem that caused it in the first place.
Well, if you forget to take your emergency brake off on your car, you have to give it more gas to go,
Right?
if it'll go,
If it will go.
or bigger engine.
Right.
The solution, of course, is to take the brake off.
Right.
If you don't do that, there are other ways to make the car go fast, but it's going to create multiple other problems.
Multiple other problems, and it's going to shorten the life expectancy of that automobile.
Of the brakes and the engine.
The brakes and the engine.
Right.
The whole vehicle, is going to be compromised. And when
Yeah.
we attack our signs and our symptoms
With the drug.
with a drug that's simply designed to cover over the sign or the symptom,
Yep.
okay, then all you're doing is allowing the body to continue to work at a less efficient state. Okay, and the laws of this universe, the laws of thermodynamics, start kicking in.
So, vaccines are basically poisonous, and of course the obvious reaction you're going to get is, well, you have to, or else what about these diseases?
What about all these diseases? Now, they've played some games with us.
With the numbers?
With the numbers.
Oh yeah, I knew that.
Yeah. Where do we start? Let's start with the granddaddy. That's the polio vaccine.
Right.
Okay.
Salk.
Yeah, the Salk vaccine. There were a couple of vaccines before Salk that caused catastrophic events.
Right.
Okay. People dying left and right. People developing paralytic polio. People developing meningitis. Okay, from the early vaccines. By the time Salk's vaccine came out, the incidence of polio had declined 75%.
What was causing the polio before that, you think?
Well, polio is spread through fecal matter. Okay, that's how it's fecal to oral. Okay, and so the abundance of polio was predominantly a sanitation issue. Okay, when we learned to flush our toilets, okay, remove our waste from our living spaces, okay, a lot of these infectious diseases started an immediate rapid decline.